Testing, testing. One, two, three, testing. Testing, testing. All right. I think I can be heard loud and clear. Hello, 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 everyone. Being tested chat run. The best time was the blurst of times. Anyways, welcome, 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 everyone. Hi, Bane. Hi, Kakra. Hi, Warcrafter. Hi, Murder. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today, we're going to be doing another reading stream. I ran a poll on Twitter. Wasn't that long of a poll, but it was a poll. I don't exactly have a lot of pull anyways, so, you know. And an overwhelming majority of people voted for A Christmas Carol. I had one vote for The Adventures of Santa Claus. So, yeah, it was unanimous, except for that final vote that tried to vote for The Adventures of Santa Claus. So, Christmas Carol won. Hands down. No contest, apparently. So, that's what we'll be doing today. Hey, we'll be reading Charles Dickens' novella, A Christmas Carol. I don't know what a novella means. I've heard the term before. Let's look it up. What is a novella? It's a work of fiction shorter than a novel, but longer than a short story. Thank you. A short novel or long short story. I believe Carmilla is counted as novella. Interesting. All right, so I haven't decided voices for all the characters, so we're gonna have to make it up as we go along. And you're gonna have to tell me if you think it's good or not. So, with all that being said, let's grab a book. Take a look in a book. It's a reading rainbow. I have a phone call. Sorry about that. Had a phone call real quick. Basically, someone was they had some clay stuff in the microwave. And I moved it somewhere else because the microwave was not a great place for it because it was metal and covered in foil. So I thought that'd be risky with somebody else in the house if they did something foolish, or they might throw it away because they have a habit of doing that. Hold on. There we go. All right. Are y'all settled in? Everyone got their book listening, snacks and drinks, some hot cocoa, a warm blanket, some fucking peppermint. I don't know. I don't know what y'all do whenever you listen to this. Let's begin. Also, it's split into stabs. Not sure what that means, but apparently they're like, I assume they're like sections of a play, maybe? I don't know. They're certainly not. Oh, maybe they're how the chapters are separated. Anyways, stab one. Marley's ghost. Hold on, let me reposition the mic. I'm gonna just keep hitting it with my chin like that. All right, how's this sound? There we go. And what? Can you spell it? Yeah, it's literally just spell stav. As in a wizard stav in a musical term. It is that as well. Which is weird because it's a novella, not a musical. Stab one. Marley's ghost. Marley was dead to begin with. There was no doubt whatsoever about that. Register is. Oh wait, I think this is all voiced by Scrooge. Give me a moment. No, it's not. Okay, it's a musical. It's not a musical. At least the book isn't. Some of the movies are, like the Muppet one, which is the best version. There was no doubt about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hands to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know, of my own knowledge, what there is particularly dead about doornails. About a doornail. Hey, Charles Dickens, why the fuck hasn't this joke been used more? Fuck, that's funny. I'm just a few lines in, and god damn it. I read Oliver Twist. Where was this humor there? I might have been inclined myself. Heard there was a stinky fish smell, so I'm here with the air freshener. Well, it's not stinky nor fish, but hyena. We're reading a Christmas carol. We just started. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadest piece of ironmongery in the trade. But the wisdom of our ancestors is in this simile, and my unhallowed hand shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will, therefore, permit me to repeat, empathetically, that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could he otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners, for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legitate, his sole friend and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by the sad event, but he was an excellent man of business the very day of the funeral, and solemnized it was with an undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point that I started from. There was no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, and nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate. If we were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing more remarkable in his taking a stroll at night in an easterly wind upon his ramparts than there would be in any other middle-aged gentleman rashly turning out after dark in a breezy spot, say St. Paul's churchyard, for instance, literally to astonish his son's weak mind. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood years afterwards, above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Some people knew to the business called Scrooge, Scrooge and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge, a squeezing, wretched, grasping, scraping, clutching, Cortavis old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, on which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheeks, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red and his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice, a frosty rime on his hand, and on his eyebrows and his wryly chin. He carried his own low temperatures always about with him. He iced his office in the dog days, and it thawed 1 degree at Christmas. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, no wintry weather could chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer than he. No falling snow was more intent upon its purpose, no pelting rain less open to injury. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. The heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet could boast the advantage over him in only one respect. They often came down handsomely, and Scrooge never did. Nobody ever stopped him in the street with the gladliest look. "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind man's dogs appeared to know him. When they saw him coming, would tug their owners into doorways and up courts, and then wag their tails though they said, "No eye at all is better than an evil eye, dark master." But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked. To edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance, was what the knowing ones called nuts to Scrooge. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, blank, biting weather, foggy withal. He could hear the people in the court outside go, wheezing up and down, beating their hands upon their breast, and stamping their feet upon the pavement stones to warm them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and the candles were flaring in the windows of the neighboring offices, like ruddy smears upon the palpable brown air. The fog came pouring in at every chink and keyhole, so dense and without that although the court was at the narrow west and houses opposite were mere phantoms, to see the dingy cloud come drooping down, obscuring everything, one might have thought that nature lived hard by and was brewing on a large scale. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open, that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who, in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so much smaller that it looked like one coal, but he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. So surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part. Wherefore the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed. A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you! Cried a cheerful voice, the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon so quickly that at the first imitation he had of his approach. "Bah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" He had so heated himself with a rapid walking in the fog and frost, this nephew of Scrooge's, that he was all in a glow. His face was ruddy and handsome. His eyes sparkled and his breath smoked again. "Christmas? A humbug, Uncle!" said Scrooge's nephew. "You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do," said Scrooge. "Merry Christmas! What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Come, then," returned the nephews gaily. "What right have you to be so dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough." Scrooge, having no better answer ready on the spur of the moment, said, "Bah!" again, followed it up with "Humbug!" "Don't be cross, Uncle," said the nephew. "What else can I be?" returned the uncle. "When I live in such a world of fools as this. Merry Christmas! Out upon Merry Christmas! What Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer. A time for balancing your books and having every item in them through a round dozens of months presented dead against you. If I could work my will," said Scrooge indignantly, "every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stick of holly through his heart. He should." "Uncle," pleaded the nephew. "Nephew," returned the uncle sternly, "keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine." "Keep it?" repeated Scrooge's uncle. "But you don't keep it." "Leave me alone, then," said Scrooge. "Much good may it do you. Much good has it ever done you." "There are many things from which I might have derived good, but by which I have not profited, I dare say," returned the nephew. "Christmas among the rest, but I am sure I've always thought of Christmas time, when it has come around, apart from the venerations due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time. A kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women, seen by one, can consent to open their shut hearts freely, to thank people below them as if they were fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on another journey. And therefore, uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and will do me good, and I say, God bless it. Yippee double reading. Hi, Ophélie. Welcome to the stream. You already know we're reading A Christmas Carol. We're just in the opening scenes here. The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded, because becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety, he poked the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. "Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir," he added, turning to his nephew. "I wonder you don't go into Parliament." "Don't be angry, uncle. Come, dine with us. As tomorrow." Scrooge said that he would see him. Yes, indeed he did. And with the whole length of the expression, and said that he would see him in that explanatory first. "But why?" said Scrooge's nephew. "Why?" Why did you get married?" said Scrooge. "Because I fell in love." "'Cause you fell in love," growled Scrooge, as if that were the one thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. "Good afternoon." "Nay, uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it a reason for not coming now?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I want nothing from you. I ask nothing from you. Why can we not be friends?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. We have never had any quarrel, to which have been a party. I have made the trial in homage to Christmas. I keep my Christmas humor to the last. So Merry Christmas, uncle." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "And a Happy New Year." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. His nephew left the room without an angry word, notwithstanding. He stopped at the outer door to bestow the greetings of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. "There's another fellow," muttered Scrooge, who overheard him. "My clerk, with 15 shillings a week, and a wife and family, talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire to Bedlam." This lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had two other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in hand, and bowed to him. "Scrooge and Marley, I believe," said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. "Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "Mr. Marley's been dead these 7 years," Scrooge replied. "He died 7 years ago this very night." "I have no doubt his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner," said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. It certainly was. They had been two kindred spirits. The ominous word liberality. Scrooge frowned and shook his head, handed the credentials back. At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge," said the gentleman, taking up a pen, "it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provisions for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessities, hundreds of thousands in want of common comforts, sir." "Are there no prisons?" asked Scrooge. "Plenty of prisons," said the gentleman, laying down the pen again. And the union workhouses, demanded Scrooge. Are they still in operation? They are still, returned the gentleman. I wish I could say they were not. The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor then, said Scrooge. Well, very busy, sir. Oh, I'm afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course, said Scrooge. I'm very glad to hear it. Under the impression that they scarcely finish Christmas cheer of mind or body to be a multitude, returned the gentleman. A few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink, and the means of warmth. We choose this time because it's a time of all others, when want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for? Nothing, Scrooge replied. You wish to be anonymous. I wish to be left alone, said Scrooge. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I cannot afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. Mary can't go there. Many would rather die. If they would rather die, they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that. But you might know it. It's not my, observed the gentleman. It is not my business, Scrooge returned. It's enough for a man to understand his own business and not interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself, and a more facetious temper was usual with him. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so. The people ran about with flaring links, proffering their service to go before horses and carriages and conduct them on their way. The ancient tower of a church, whose guff-old bells were always peeping slyly down at Scrooge out of a Gothic window, and the wall became invisible, and struck the hours and quarters in the clouds with tumultuous vibrations, afterwards as if the teeth were chattering in his frozen heads up there. The cold became intense. In the main street at the corner of the court, some laborers were repairing the gas pipes, and lighted a great fire in a brazier, rounded with a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. The water plug being left in solitude, its overflowing sullenly congealed and turned to mithcopic ice. The brightness of the shops, where holly springs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows, made pale faces ruddy as they passed. Upholsterers and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant, with which was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and sale had anything to do. The Lord Mayor, whose household should, and even the little tailor, whom had fined 5 shillings on the previous Monday for being drunk and bloodthirsty in the streets, stirred up tomorrow's pudding in his garret, while his lean wife and babies hauled out to buy the beef. Foggier yet and colder, piercing, searching, biting cold, the good St. Dunstan had but nipped the evil spirit's nose to the torch of such weather as that, instead of using his familiar weapon, then indeed he would have roared in lust he proposed. The owner of one scanty young nose gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold as the bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him a Christmas carol, the first sound of God bless ye merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay. Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even congealed frost. at the length of the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tactfully admitted the fact to the expectant clerk, in the tank, who instantly snuffed his candle out and put on his hat. "You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose," said Scrooge. "If quite convenient, sir." "It's not convenient," said Scrooge, "and it's not fair. If I was to stop a half-crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound." The clerk smiled faintly. "And yet," said Scrooge, "you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work." The clerk observed that it was only once a year. "A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December," said Scrooge, buttoning his great coat to the chin. "But I suppose you may have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning." The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no great coat, went down a slide in the cornhill at the end of a lane of boys, 20 times in honor of being Christmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town, as hard as he could pelt, to play at Blindman's Bluff. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern. Having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard, where it had so little business to be that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing at hide and seek with other houses, and forgotten the way out again. It was old enough now and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge. Ah, think of the 20 streak. "God rest ye merry gentlemen, there's nothing you dismay." I've actually never heard that song in its entirety, so I don't even know if I have those notes right. It was old enough now and dear and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being all left out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope with his hands. Thanks for the hydrate. The fog and frost so hung about the black old gateway of the house, it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in a mournful meditation on the threshold. Now it is a fact there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It was also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Also, that Scrooge had as little of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London, even including, which is a bold word, the corporation, aldermen, and livery. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley in his last mention of his 7-year dead partner that afternoon. And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having the key to the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any immediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. It was not an impenetrable shadow of the other objects in the yard were, but a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if the breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That, and its livid color, made it horrible. But its horror seemed to be in spite of the face and beyond its control, rather than a part of its own expression. When your past, present, comes casually visit you for Christmas at 3 a.m. gone wrong. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation to which he had been a stranger from infancy, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, and lighted his candle. He did pause the moment's irresolution, for he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he half expected to be terrified at the sight of Marley's pigtail sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing in the back of the door, except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on. So he said, "Phoo, phoo," and closed it with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above and every cask in the wine merchant's cellar below appeared to have a separate peal of echo of its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming his candle as he went. You may talk vaguely about driving a coach and six up a good old flight of stairs, and though a bad young act of parliament, and through a bad head young act of parliament, but I mean to say that you might have gotten a hearse up that staircase and taken it broadwise, with a splinter bar or towards the wall, the doors towards the balusters, and done it easily. There is plenty of width for that, and room to spare. Is perhaps the reason why Scrooge thought it saw a locomotive hearse going on before him in the gloom. Half a dozen gas lights out the street wouldn't have lighted the entry too well, so you may suppose it was pretty dark for Scrooge's dip. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for that. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. Before he could shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa, a small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and the little saucepan of gruel. Scrooge had a cold in his head. Upon the hob. Nobody near the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. Lumber room as usual, old fire guards, old shoes, two fish baskets, washing stand on three legs, and a poker. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in, double locking himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he took off his cavert, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. It was a very low fire indeed. Nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it and brood over it, for he could extract the last sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. The fireplace is an old one, built by some Dutch merchant long ago, and paved all around with quaint Dutch tile, designed to illustrate the scriptures. Roe is cold and alone like a sad old man, Jesus. Yeah, but he likes it, which is weird, because that's depressing. There were Cain and Abel's, Pharaoh's daughter, queens of Sheba, angelic messengers descending through the air on clouds like feathered beds, Abraham's, Behazar's, was pulling off to sea in butter boats, hundreds of figures to attract his thoughts. And yet the face of Marley, 7 years dead, came like the ancient prophet's rod and swallowed up the whole. If each smooth tile had been blanket first with power to shape some picture of its surface from the disjointed fragments of his thoughts, there would have been a copy of old Marley's head on every one. Humbug, said Scrooge, and walked across the room. After several turns, he sat down again. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell that hung in the room, and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with a chamber in the high story of the building. With great astonishment and a strange, inexplicable dread that he looked, saw the bell begin to swing. It swung so softly in the outlet that it scarcely made a sound, and soon it rang out loudly. So did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute, or a minute, or seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the cask in the wine merchant's cellar. Shrews then remembered to have heard the ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open, the booming sound, and he heard the noise much louder. On the floor below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door. It's humbug still, said Scrooge. I won't believe it. His color changed as though when in without a pause, came on through the heavy door and passed the room before his eyes. Upon its coming, the dying flame leaped up as though it cried, I know him! Marley's ghost! And fell again. All right. I'm going to take a quick auto break and I'll be right back. What you reading there? I'm reading A Christmas Carol. Anyways, beer week. All right, I'm back. What made you read Christmas Carol? So I do reading streams every now and then, and it's Christmas season. It's a few days away. I felt like reading a Christmassy story, and it was between this and the life and adventures of Santa Claus. Okay, thank you, Kakara. Thank you, Ophelia. The same face. Mary Chrysler. The same face. The very same. Marley in his pigtail. Usual waistcoat. Merry Christmas, y'all. Marley in his pigtail. Usual waistcoat, tights, and boots. The tassels on his latter bristling. Like his pigtail and his coat skirt and hat upon his head. The chain he drew was clasped around his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and was made, for Scrooge observed it closely, of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, heavy purses wrought in steel. Its body was transparent. But Scrooge, observing him, and looking through his waistcoat, could see the two buttons on the coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it was said that Marley had no bowels, but he had never believed it until now. No, nor did he believe it even now. Though he looked the phantom through and through, and saw it standing before him, though he felt the chilling influence of the death cold eyes, and marked the very texture of the folded kerchief bound about his head and chin, which wrapper he had not observed before, he was still incredulous and fought against his senses. "How now?" said Scrooge, Cretaceous and cold as ever. "What do you want with me?" "March!" Marley's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you? Ask me who I was." "Who were you then?" said Scrooge, raising his voice. "You're particular for shade." He was going to say to a shade, but substituted this as much was more appropriate. "In life I was your partner, Jacob Marley." Can you sit down?" asked Scrooge, looking doubtful at him. "I can." "Do it then." Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair, and felt that in the event of being impossible it might involve necessity of an embarrassing explanation. The ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace, if it were used to it. "You don't believe me?" observed the ghost. "I don't. What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?" "I don't know." "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because," said Scrooge, "a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheat. They may be undigested bits of beef, a bloat of mustard, a crumb of cheese, or a fragment of an underdone potato. And that's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are." Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes, nor did he feel in his heart by any means waggish then. The truth is that he tried to be smart, as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his terror. For the spectre's voice disturbed the very marrow in his bones. To sit staring at these fixed, glazed eyes in silence for a moment would play. Scrooge felt the very deuce with him. There was something very awful to the spectre being provided with an infernal atmosphere of its own. Scrooge could not feel it himself. That was clearly the case, for though the ghost sat perfectly motionless, its hair, skirt, and tassels still agitated as by the hot vapor from an oven. "You see this toothpick?" said Scrooge, returning quickly to the charge, for the reason that just assigned, and wishing, though it were only for a second, to divert the vision's stony gaze from him. "I do," replied the ghost. "You're not looking at it," said Scrooge. "But I see it," said the ghost, "notwithstanding." "Wells," returned Scrooge, "I have but to swallow this, and be, for the rest of my days, persecuted by the legion of goblins, all of my own creation. Humbug, I tell you, humbug!" At this, the spirit raised a frightful cry and shook his chains with a dismal and appalling noise as Scrooge held on tight to his chair and saved him from falling in a swoon. But how much greater was his horror when the phantom took off his bandage round his head and were too worn to wear indoors. Its lower jaw dropped below its breast. Scrooge fell to his knees and clapped his hands before his face. "Mercy!" he said. "Dreadful apparition! Why do you trouble me?" "Man of the worldly mind," replied the ghost, "do you believe in me or not?" "I do," said Scrooge. "I must. Why do spirits walk the earth? Why do they come to me?" "It is required of every man," the ghost returned. "The spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men, and travel far and wide. If the spirit goes not forth in his life, he is condemned to do so after death, and is doomed to wander through the world. Oh, woe is me! It witnessed what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turned to happiness." Again the spectre raised a cry, and shook its chain, and wrung its shadowy hand. "You are fettered," said Scrooge, trembling. "Tell me why." "I wear the chains I force in life. I made it link by link, yard by yard, grinded it on my own free will, and on my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you?" Scrooge trembled more and more. "Oh, would you know?" Didn't really know the movie, but I loved how dramatic and good the movie was. I mean, the Muppet movie was awesome. There's been a lot of good interpretations of this story in movies, but the Muppet one, it's so good. And the Disney Mickey one, that one's really good too. "Oh, would you know?" pursued the ghost. "The weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself. It is full and heavy as long as this 7 Christmas Eves go. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain." Scrooge glanced about him on the floor in the expectation of finding himself surrounded by some 50 or 60 fathoms of iron cable, but he could see nothing. "Jacob," he said implorably. "Oh, Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob." "I have none to give," the ghost replied. "It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge, and is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Nor can I tell you what I would. A very little more is all permitted to me. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house, mark me. In life, my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hull. Unwearying journey lies before me." Another Disney Mickey one. Watch the one 3D Jim Carrey one. That one has some spooky imagery. But yeah, it is pretty good. They leaned in full into the horror of that one, especially during this scene. It was a habit with Scrooge, whenever he would become thoughtful, to put his hand in his breeches pocket, pondering what the ghost had said. He did so now, but without lifting his eyes or getting off his knees. "You must have been very slow about it, Jacob," Scrooge observed in a businesslike manner, though with humility and deference. "Slow?" the ghost repeated. "7 years dead," mused Scrooge, "and traveling all the time." "The whole time," said the ghost. "No rest, no peace, incessant torture of remorse." "You travel fast," said Scrooge. "On the wings of the wind," replied the ghost. "You might have gotten over a quality of ground in 7 years, or a quantity of ground in 7 years," said Scrooge. The ghost, on hearing this, set up another cry, clanked its chains so heinously, If the dead silent in the night, the ward would have been justified in indicating it's for such a nuisance. "Oh, Captain Bound and Double Iron!" cried the Phantom. "Not to know what age of incessant labor by immortal creatures, for this earth must pass into eternity before the good of which it is susceptible is all developed. Not to know that any Christmas spirit working kindly in its little sphere, whatever it may be, will keep its mortal life for too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one's life opportunity he misused. Yet such was I. Oh, such was I. But you're always a good man of business, Jacob, faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. Business? Cried the ghost, wringing its hands again. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. Dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. It held up a chain at arm's length, if it were the cause of all its unveiling grief, and flung it heavily upon the ground again. At this time of the rolling year, the spectre said, I suffer most. Why did I walk the crowds of fellow beings my eyes turned down? Never raised them to that blessed star which led the wise man to a poor abode. Were there no poor homes to which its light would have conducted me? Scrooge was very dismayed upon hearing the spectre go on at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly. Hear me, said the ghost. My time is nearly gone. I will, said Scrooge, but don't be hard upon me, and don't be flowery, Jacob, pray. How is it that I ever appeared before you in a shape that you can see? I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many, many a day. It was not an agreeable idea. Scrooge shivered and wiped the perspiration from his brow. There is no light part of my penance, pursued the ghost. I am here tonight to warn you, and you have yet a chance of hope to escape my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring, Ebenezer. You're always a good friend to me, said Scrooge. Thank ye. You'll be haunted, resumed the ghost, by 3 spirits. Scrooge's countenance fell almost as low as the ghost had done. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? He demanded in a faltering voice. It is. I think I'd rather not, said Scrooge. Without their visits, said the ghost, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Except the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1. Shouldn't I take them all at once and have it over, Jacob? Hinted Scrooge. Expect the second the next night at the same hour. The third upon the next night, the last stroke of 12, has ceased to vibrate. Look to me, look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake. You remember what has passed between us. When it had said these words, the spectre took its wrapper from the table, bound its round head as before. Scrooge knew this, but the smart sound its teeth made and the jaws were brought together by the bandage. He ventured to raise his eyes again, and found his supernatural visitor comfort him in an erect attitude, the chain wound over and about its arm. The apparition walked backwards from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to approach, which he did. And there, within 2 paces of each other, Marley's ghost held up its hand, warning him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped. Not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear, raising the hand to become sensible of the confused noise in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailing and inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the blank dark night. Scrooge followed to the window. Desperate in his curiosity, he looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in the restless haste, moaning as they went, and every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. Some few, they might be guilty governments, were linked together. None were free. Many had personally known the Scrooge in their lives. He had quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat with a monstrous iron safe latched to his ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to assist a wretched woman with an infant whom it saw below upon a doorstep. And the misery with them all was clearly they sought to interfere for good in human manner and lost the power forever. Ghostbusters. That'd be a little mean at this point. They're already having to suffer. Imagine getting blasted after that. Or these creatures faded to mist, or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell. They and their spirits voiced fade together. The night became as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked. He had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. And being from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigue of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, and the lateness of the hour, which in need of repose, went straight to bed without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant. Stab 2. The first of the three spirits. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark. Looking out of the bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighboring church struck the 4 quarters, so he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went out from 6 to 7, from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12, then stopped. 12. It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong. An icicle must have gotten in the works. 12. He touched the spring of his repeater to erect the most preposterous clock. Its rapid little pulse beat 12, and stopped. "Why, it is impossible," said Scrooge, "that I could have slept through a whole day and fallen into another night. Impossible that anything happened to the sun. This is 12 at noon." The idea being an alarming one, he scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. He was obliged to rub the frost off the sleeve of his dressing gown before he could see anything. He could see very little then. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy, extremely cold, that there was no noise of people running to and fro, making a great stir as there unquestionably would have been if night had beaten off bright day and taken possession of the world. This was a great relief, because 3 days after their sight of the first of exchange paid to Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge, or his order, or so forth, would have become a mere United States security if there was no days to count by. Scrooge went to bed again and thought and thought and thought it over and over and over. Couldn't make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed he was. The more he endeavored not to think, the more he thought. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. Every time he resolved within himself after mature inquiry that it was all a dream, his mind flew back again, like a strong spring released to its first position, presented the same problem to be worked up all through. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge lay in the state until the chime had gone 3 quarters more, when he remembered. on a sudden that the ghost had warned him of visitation when the bell tolled one. He resolved to lie awake until the hour had passed, considering he could do no more than go to sleep than go to heaven. This was perhaps the wisest resolution in his power. The corridor was so long that he was more than once convinced he must have sunk into doze unconsciously amidst the clock. At length it broke upon his listening ear. Dong. Quarter past, said Scrooge, counting. Ding dong. Half past, said Scrooge. Ding dong. Quarter to it, said Scrooge. Ding dong. The hour itself, said Scrooge triumphantly, and nothing else. He spoke before the hour bell sounded, which now it did with the deep, dull, hollow melancholy of one. The light flashed in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn. The curtain of his beds were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand. Not the curtains at his feet, nor the curtains at his back, those which his face was addressed. The curtain of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge, starting up into a half recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with an unearthly visitor, who drew them as close as I am now to you, and I am standing in the spirit at your elbow. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so much like a child, as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportion. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face was not a wrinkle to it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same as if it held more of an uncommon strength. Its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were, like those upper members, it was bare. It wore a tunic of purest white, and round its waist bore looked Lauracious his belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a branch of freshly green holly in its hand, and in singular contradiction that its wintry emblem had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. The strange thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, which was doubtless the occasion of its using. In its duller moments, a great extinguisher for a cap, which is now held under its arm. Even this, though, when Scrooge looked at it, increasingly steadiness was not its strange quality, for its belt sparkled and glittered, now in one part, now in another. The light in one instant, at another time was dark. The figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, betting now that a thing with one arm, now with one leg, now with 20 legs, now a pair of legs without a head, now a head without a body, of which dissolving parts no outline could be visible in the dense gloom wherein they melted away. And the very wonder of this, it would be itself again distinct and clear as ever. Biblically accurate angel. Are you the spirit, sir, who coming was foretold to me? Asked Scrooge. I am. The voice was soft and gentle, singularly low, as if instead of being close to him, it were at a distance. Who and what are you? Scrooge demanded. I am the ghost of Christmas past. Long past? Inquired Scrooge, observant of its dwarfish stature. No, your past. Perhaps Scrooge could not have told anybody why, if anybody could have asked him. But if he had a special desire to see the spirit in his cap, and begged him to be covered. What? What? Exclaimed the ghost. Would you so soon put out, with worldly hands, the light I give? Is it not enough that you're one of those whose passions made this cap, and forced me through the train of years to wear it low upon my brow? Scrooge reservedly disclaimed all intentions to offend or any knowledge of having wilfully bonneted the spirit at any period in his life, then made bold to inquire what business brought him there. "Your welfare," said the ghost. Scrooge pressed himself much more obliged, and could not help thinking that a night of unbroken rest would have been more conducted to that end. The spirit must have heard him thinking, for it said immediately, "Your recollection, then. Take heed." It put out a strong arm as it spoke, and clasped him gently by the arm. "Rise and walk with me." It would have been in vain for Scrooge to plead. The weather and the hours were not adapted to pedestrian purpose. The bed was warm, and the thermometer a long way below freezing. That he was clad but lightly in his slippers, dressing gown, and nightcap. They had cold upon him at the same time. The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding that, the spirit made towards the window, and clasped his rose in supplication. "I mortal!" Scrooge moted, "and liable to fall." "Bear but a touch of my hand." "There," said the spirit, laying it upon his heart, "you shall be upheld in more than this." As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road, with fields on either hand. The city had entirely vanished. Yeah, the candle was scary. Yep. City had entirely vanished. Not a vestige of it was to be seen. The darkness and mist had vanished with it, for it was a clear, cold winter day, with the snow upon the ground. "Good heavens!" said Scrooge, clasping his hands together as he looked about him. "I was bred in this place. I was a boy here." The spirit gazed upon him mildly, its gentle touch. Thanks to the hydrophily. Its gentle touch, though it had been light and instantaneous. Ah, yes, childhood trauma. Oh, boy! Appeared still present to the old man's sense of feeling. He was conscious of 1,000 odors floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten. "Your lip is trembling," said the ghost. "What is that upon your cheek?" Scrooge muttered with an unusual catching in his voice. It was a pimple, and begged the ghost to lead him to where he would. "You recollect the way?" inquired the spirit. "Remember it!" cried the Scrooge with fervor. "I could walk it blindfolded." "Strange to have forgotten it for so many years," observed the ghost. "Let us go on." They walked upon the road. Scrooge recognized every gate, post, and tree, till a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting towards them, with boys upon their backs, who called to other boys in country gigs and carts driven by farmers. All these boys were in good spirits and shouted to each other, until the broad fields were so full of merry music the crisp air laughed to hear it. "These are but shadows of things that have been," said the ghost. "They have no consciousness of us." The jewels and travelers came on, and as they came, Scrooge knew and named every one. Why was he rejoiced beyond all these bounds to see them? Why did his cold eyes glisten, and his heart leap up as they passed? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmas, as they parted at crossroads and byways for several homes? What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas! What good has it ever done him? "The school is not quite deserted," said the ghost. "A solitary child neglected by his friends is left there still." Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed. They left the high road by a well-remembered lane, and soon approached a mansion of dull red brick, with little weathercock a surmounted cupola on the roof and a bell hanging in it. It was a large house, but one of broken fortune, for the spacious office were little used. Their walls were damp and mossy, their windows broken, the gates decayed. The fowls chuckled and stuttered in the stables. The coaches, horses, and sheds were overrun with grass. Merry Christmas, lads. Nor was it more retentive of its ancient state within, for entering the dreary halls and glancing through the open doors and many rooms, they found them poorly furnished, cold and vast. There an earthly savour in the air, a chilly barrenness in the place, which associated itself somewhere with too much giving up by the candlelight, and not too much to eat. They went to the ghost. They went, the ghost and Scrooge, across the hall to a door at the back of the house. It opened before them and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made barer still by lines of plain deal forms and desks. At one of these a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire. Scrooge sat down upon a form and wept to see his poor forgotten self as he used to be. Not a latent echo in the house, not a squeak, a scuffle from the mice behind the paneling, not a drip from the half-thawed waterspout in the dull yard behind, not a sigh among the leafless rots of one despondent and popular, not the idle swinging of an empty storehouse door. No, not a clicking in the fire. It fell upon the heart of Scrooge, a softening influence, and gave a freer passage to his tears. The spirit touched him on the arm and pointed to his younger self, intent upon his reading. Suddenly a man in foreign garments, wonderfully real and distinct to look at, stood outside the window with an axe stuck to his belt, leading by the bridle, while an ass laden with wood. "Why, it's Ali Baba!" Scrooge exclaimed in ecstasy. "It's dear old honest Ali Baba. Yes, yes, I know. One Christmas time, when yonder solitary child left here all alone, he did come, for the first time, just like that. Poor boy. And Valentine," said Scrooge, "and his wild brother, Orson. There they go. What was his name? Who was put down in his drawers, asleep at the gates of Damascus. Don't you see him? The Sultan's groom, turned upside down by the Jinnai. There he is upon his head. Serve him right. I'm glad of it. What business had he to be married to the princess?" To hear Scrooge expending all his eagerness of his nature on such subjects, a most extraordinary voice, between laughing and crying, to see his heightened and excited face, would have been a surprise to his business friends in the city indeed. "There's the patriot!" cried Scrooge. "Green body and yellow tail, with a thing like lettuce growing out the top of his head. There he is. Poor Robin Crusoe. He called him whenever he got home again after sailing around the island. Poor Robin Crusoe. Where have you been, Robin Crusoe? The man thought he was dreaming, but he wasn't. It was the parrot, you know. There goes Friday, running for his life to the little creek. Holla hoop, hello!" It was rapid transition of every foreign to his usual character, said in pity to his poorer self, "Poor boy," and cried again. "I wish," Scrooge muttered, putting his hand in his pocket, looking about him, after drying his eyes with his cuff. "But it's too late now." "What's the matter?" asked the spirit. "Nothing," said Scrooge. "Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should have liked to give him something, that's all." The ghost smiled and thoughtfully and waved its hand, saying as it did, "Let's see another Christmas." Scrooge's former self grew larger at the words, and the room became darker and more dirty
The panels shrunk, the windows cracked, fragments of plaster fell off the ceiling, and naked laths were shown instead. But how all this was brought about, Scrooge knew no more than you do. He only knew that it was quite correct, that everything that happened had happened so they would be alone again when all the other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays. He was not reading now, but walking up and down, despairingly. Scrooge looked at the ghost, a mournful shaking of his head, and glanced anxiously towards the door. It opened, and a little girl, much younger than the boy, came darting in, putting her arms around his neck and often kissing him, addressing him as, "Dear, dear brother! I've come you to bring you home, dear brother," said the child, clasping her tiny hands and bidding down to laugh. "To bring you home, home, home!" "Home, little Fron?" "Yes," the child, brimming with glee. "Home for good and all. Home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That home's like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed. I'm not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. And he said, yes, you should, and send me a coach to bring you. And you're to be a man," child opening her eyes, "and never come back here. But first, we'll be together all Christmas long, and the merriest time in all the world." "You're quite a woman, little Fawn," exclaimed the boy. She clasped her hands and laughed, and tried to touch his head. Being so little, laughed again, stood on her tiptoes to embrace him, began to drag him in his childish eagerness towards the door, and he, nothing loath to go, accompanied her. A terrible voice in the hall cried, "Bring down Mr. Scrooge's box there!" And in the hall appeared the schoolmaster himself, who glared at Master Scrooge with a ferocious condescension, and threw him a dreadful state of mind by shaking hands with him. He then conveyed him and his sister into the veriest old well of a chivalry in best parlour that ever was seen, where the maps upon the wall and terrestrial globes on the windows were waxy with cold. Here he produced a decanter of curiously light wine, and a block of curiously heavy cake, and administered installments of these dainties to the young people at the same time, sending out a eager servant to offer a glass of something to the postboy, who answered that he was thanking the gentleman, but with the same tap as he had tasted before, and he had rather not. Master Scrooge, his trunk being by this time tied upon the top of the chassis, the children bade the schoolmaster good night right willingly, and getting into it, drove gaily down the garden sweep. Then quickly wheels dashed the hoarse frost and swallowed them from the dark leaves of the evergreens like spray. "Always a delicate creature, whom the rest might have withered," said the ghost. "But she has a large heart."
So she had, said Scrooge. You're right. I will not gainsay it. Spirit, God forbid it.
"She died a woman," said the ghost, "and had, as I think, children."
One child,
Scrooge returned. "True," said the ghost. "Your nephew." Scrooge seemed uneasy in his mind, answered briefly,
yes.
Although they had but the moment left the school behind them, they were now in the busy thoroughfares of a city where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, where shadowy carts and coaches battled for the way, and all the strife and tumult of real city. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here too it was Christmas time again. But it was evening, and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door, and asked Scrooge if he knew it.
Know it, said Scrooge. Was I apprentice here?
They went in, at the sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig, sitting behind such a high desk that had been 2 inches taller, he might have knocked his head through the ceiling. He was cried in excitement.
Why, it's old Fizwig! Bless its heart, it's Fizwig alive again.
Old Fizwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, pointed the hour of 7, rubbed his hands, adjusted his conspicuous waistcoat, laughed all over himself from his shoes to his organ of benevolence, and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, Yo ho there, Ebenezer! Dick! Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow prentice. Dick Williams, to be sure, said Scrooge to the ghost. Bless me, yes, there he is. Must have been very much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick. Dear, can't take that name seriously. Dear, dear. Yo ho, my boys, said Fizwig. No more work tonight. Christmas Eve. Dick, Christmas. Ebenezer, let's have some shutters. Let's have the shutters up, cried old Fizwig, a sharp clap of his hands. Before man can say Jack Robertson. You wouldn't believe how these fellows went at it. They charged into the street with the shutters. 1, 2, 3, had them in their place. 4, 5, 6, barred and pinned 'em. 7, 8, 9, and came back before you could get to 12, panting like a racehorse. Hi ho! Cried old Fizwig, skipping down from the high desk with wonderful agility. Clear away, my lads, and have lots of room here. Hi ho, Dick! Chirp, Ebenezer! Imagine being called Dick Gumshoe. Well, then you're just an Ace Attorney character who cannot catch a fucking break. Feel bad for Scrooge in that passage. Clear away. There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away, or couldn't have cleared away. The old Fizwick looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off as if it were dismissed from public life forevermore. The floor was swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon the fire, the warehouse was snug and warm and dry and bright as a ballroom as you could desire to see upon a winter's night. In came a fiddler, a music book, and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it, and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fizwig, one vast substantial smile. In came 3 Miss Figwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young followers whose hearts they broke. Ah, so his daughters. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin and the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In came the boy from over the way who was suspected of not having board enough from his master, trying to hide himself behind the girl from next door, but one who proved to have had her ears pulled by her mistress. And they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling, and they all came, anyhow and everyhow. Away they all went, 20 couples at once, hands half round and back again the other way, down the middle and up again, round and round in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couples always turning up in the wrong place, new top couples starting off again as soon as they got there, all top couples at last, not a bottom one to help them. If these results were brought about, old Fizwick clapped his hands to stop the dance, cried out, "Well done!" The fiddler plunged his hot face into a pot of porter, especially provided for that purpose. Scorning rest upon his reappearance, he instantly began again, though there were no dancers yet, for the other fiddler had carried home exhausted on a shutter, and were a barn new man, resolved to beat him out of sight or perish. There were more dances, there were forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was nuggets, and there was great pieces of cold roast, and there was plenty of great pieces of cold boiled, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and the boiled, when the fiddler, an artful dog mind, and the sort of man who knew his business better than you and I could have told you, struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fizwick stood out to dance with Mrs. Fizwick. Top couple, too, with a good stiff piece of work cut out for them. 3 or 4, and about 20 pairs of partners, people who were not to be trifled with, people who would dance, had no notion of walking. Well, if there hadn't been twice as many, or 4 times, James, old Fizwick would have been a match for them, and so would Mrs. Fizwick. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If not high praise, tell me higher, and I'll use it. A positive light appearing to issue from Fizwick's calf, they shone in every part of the dance like moons. You couldn't have predicted at any given time what would have become of them next. And when old Fizwick and Mrs. Fizwick had gone through the dance, advanced and retired, both hands to their partner, bowed and curtsied, corkscrewed, thread the needle, back again to their place, Fizwick cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs, and came upon his feet again without a stagger. The clock struck 11. This domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Figwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, shaking hands with each person individually as he or she went out, and wished him or her a Merry Christmas. When everyone had retired but the 2 apprentices, they did the same to them, and thus the cheerful voices died away. The lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop. During the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene, with his former self. He comported everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until now the bright faces of his former self and Dick were turned from them that he remembered the ghost. Became conscious that it was looking full upon him. The light upon its head burnt very clear. "A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these silly folk so full of gratitude." "Small!" The spirit signed to him to listen to the 2 apprentices who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fizwick, and had done so said, "Why is it not? He's spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?" "It isn't that," said Scrooge, heated by the remark, and speaking consciously, like his former, not his latter self. "It is that, spirit, he has the power to render us unhappy, or happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in the words and look, in things so slight and insignificant, impossible to add and count 'em up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as it costs a fortune." He felt the spirit's glance and stopped. "What's the matter?" asked the ghost. "Nothing in particular," said Scrooge. "Something, I think," the ghost insisted. "No," said Scrooge. "No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now. That's all." His former self turned down the lamps, gave an utterance of the wish, and Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air. "My time grows short," observed the spirit. "Quick!" This was not addressed to Scrooge, or to any one whom he could see, but it produced an immediate effect. For again Scrooge saw himself. He was older now, a man in the prime of his life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of latter years, but had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. The eager, greedy, restless motion in the eyes, which showed the passion that had taken root when the shadows of the growing tree would fall. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a mourning dress, in whose eyes there were tears, sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past. "It's of little matter," she said softly, "to you, a very little. Another idol has displaced me, and it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to, but I have no just cause to grieve." "What idol has displaced you?" he rejoined. A golden one. This is the even-handed dealings of the world, he said. There is nothing on which is so hard as poverty. There is nothing to profess to condemn of which severity is the pursuit of wealth. You fear the world too much, she answered gently. All your other hopes emerged in the hope of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one till the master passion gain engrosses you. Have I not? What then? He retorted. Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed towards you. She shook her head. Am I not? Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and content to be so. Until in good season, we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man. I was a boy, he said impatiently. Your own feelings tell you that you are not what you were, she returned. I am. That which promised happiness when we were in one heart is fought with memory now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I would not say. It is enough that I have thought it and can release you. Have I ever sought release? In words, no, never. In what then? In a changed nature, an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end, and everything that made my love of any worth, of any value in your sight, if this had never been between us. The girl said, looking mildly, but her steadiness upon him. Tell me, would you seek me out and try to win me now? Ah, no. Awfully no more wife. Well, wasn't a wife, a fiance at the time, but yeah. He seemed to yield to the justice of the supposition, in spite of himself, said with a struggle, You think not? I would gladly think otherwise if I could, she answered. Heavens knows, when I learned a truth like this, I know strong and irresistible it must be. But if you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can even I believe that you would choose a dowerless girl? You, who in your very confidence would weigh everything by gain, or choosing her, if for a moment you were false enough to your one guiding principle to do so. Do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do, and I release you, with a full heart for the love of him you once were. He was about to speak, with her head turned from him. She resumed. You may. The memory of what is past makes me hope you will have pain in this. A very, very brief time, and you will dismiss the recollection of it, gladly as is an unprofitable dream from which has happened, well that you awoke. May you be happy in the life you have chosen. She left him, and they parted. Spirit, said Scrooge, show me no more. Conduct me home. What do you delight to torture me? One shadow more, explained the ghost. No more, cried Scrooge. No more. I don't wish to see it. Show me no more. The relentless ghost pinioned him in both his hands and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene, in place. A room not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire, as a beautiful girl, so like the last that Scrooge believed it was the same, until he saw her. Now a comely matron, sitting opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there were more children there than Scrooge in his agitated state of mind could count. Unlike the celebrated herd in the poem, there were not 40 children conducting themselves like one, or every child conducting themselves like 40. The consequences were uh, aperiocious beyond belief. But no one seemed to care. On the contrary, the mother and daughter laughed heartily, and enjoyed it very much, and the latter soon, beginning to mingle in the sports, got pillaged by young brigands most ruthlessly. What would I not have given to be one of them, though I could never have been so rude. No, no, I wouldn't for the wealth of all the world have crushed that braided hair, torn it down, and for the precious little shoe, I wouldn't have plucked it off. God bless my soul to save my life. As to measuring her waist in sport as they did, bold young brood, I couldn't have done it. Couldn't have expected my arm to have grown round it for a punishment, never come straight again, and yet I should have dearly liked. I own to have touched her lips, and questioned her, that she might have opened them, to have looked upon the lashes of her downcast eyes and never raised a blush, to have let loose waves of hair, an inch of which could be a keepsake beyond price. In short, I should have liked, I do confess, the lightest license of a child, yet have been the man enough to know its value. But now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensued that she was laughing face and plunderous dress was borne together at the center of a flushed, boisterous group, just in time to greet the father, who came home attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents. Then the shouting and struggling, the onslaught that made on the defenseless porter, the scaling him with chairs or ladders to dive into his pockets to spoil him of brown paper parcels, hold on tight by his cravat, hug him round the neck, pummel his back, and kick his legs in irrepressible affection, the shouts of wonder and delight with which the development of every package was received, the terrible announcement that the baby had taken in the act of putting a doll's frying pan in his mouth was more than a suspect of having swallowed a fictitious turkey glued on a wooden platter. The immense relief of finding this a false alarm, the joy and gratitude and ecstasy, they were all indescribable alike, is enough that by degrees of the children their emotions got out of the parlor, and by one stair at a time up to the top of the house, where they went to bed, and so subsided. And now Scrooge looked on more attentive than ever, and the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside, when he thought that such another creature, quite as gracefully and as full of promise, might have called him father. In springtime, the haggard weather of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed. "Bill," said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile, "saw an old friend of yours today." "Who was it?" "Yes. How can I? Don't I know?" And in the same breath, laughing as he laughed, "Mr. Scrooge." "Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window. It was not shut up. He had a candle inside. Scarcely helped seeing him. Pardon lays upon the point of death. I hear and there that he sat alone, quite alone in the world, I do suppose." "Spirit!" said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place." "I told you, these were shadows of things that have been," said the ghost. "They are what they are. Do not blame me."
"Remove me!"
Scrooge exclaimed.
"I cannot bear it."
He turned upon the ghost, seeing it looked upon him with a face in which in some strange way there were fragments of all the faces had shown him, wrestling with it.
"Leave me! Take me back! Haunt me no longer!"
And the struggle, if that can be called a struggle, in which the ghost, with no visible resistance of its own part, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary. Scrooge observed that the light was burning high and bright, and dimly connected that with its influence over him, he seized the extinguisher cap, by a sudden action pressed down upon its head. The spirit dropped beneath it, the extinguisher covered its whole form, And though Scrooge had pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light which streamed from under its unbroken flood of the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by irresistible drowsiness, and further, being in his own bedroom, he gave the cap a parting squeeze, in which the hands relaxed, and barely had time to reel to bed, for he sank into a heavy sleep. All right. Before I continue to the second ghost, I need to take another quick idle break. All right, I'm back. EP by killing a ghost. All right, let's get that stretch in. I'm back. Thank you. All right. Continuing on to stab 3, the second of the 3 spirits. Awakening in the middle of the prodigiously tough snore, and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. He felt that he restored to consciousness to the right nick of time, for the special purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched to him through Jacob Marley's intervention. Hi, Devilfish. I am the ghost of Christmas Never. Work! Near! It's sick, my dear. I can hear you sniffle. Hope you feel better. Oh, just usual allergy stuff, I think. Eating Devilfish. Not the ghost of Christmas Never. Also, hi, Foam. Welcome to the stream. but finding that he had turned uncomfortably cold when he began to wonder which of his curtains the new spectre would draw back, he put every one aside with his own hands. The ghost that comes and tells Scrooge to change nothing about himself, be proud of who he is. Continue being a dick. Bye. He put them every one aside with his own hands, lying down again, established by a sharp lookout all around the bed, for he wished to challenge the spirit in the moment of its appearance, not wish to be taken by surprise and made nervous. Showing future where he uses Tiny Tim and children like him for manual labor because they know even if their legs are lame, still have hands for now. Yeah, Tiny Tim doesn't last that long. That won't really work. He's kind of dying. Uh, so with like the conclusion of this story, with how Tiny Tim lives, it is suspected. Well, some people have kind of put together what kind of disease Tiny Tim might have had, even if it was just made for the purposes of this. It was one that actually affected a lot of orphans at the time. That was simply solved with proper nutrition. Now to do any of the ones that make money in the meantime. Polio? I don't know. I know this one just needed was a result of malnutrition. I don't know the symptoms of polio. Yeah, it was a one of the main ones is that it's suspected that the disease was one that was brought on by malnutrition, which is why he lives in the case that Scrooge actually decides to help. Gentlemen of the free and easy sort who plume themselves on being acquainted with a move or two and being usually equal to the time of day express the wide range of their capacity for adventure by observing that they are good for anything but pitch and toss to manslaughter, between which opposite extremes, no doubt, there lies a tolerable wide and comprehensive range of subjects, without venturing for Scrooge quite as heartily as this. I don't mind calling on you to believe that he was ready for a good broad field of strange appearances. Nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros would have astonished him very much. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently when the bell struck one and no shapes appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time he laid upon his bed, the very core and center of a blaze of ruddy light which streamed upon it with the clock proclaimed the hour, which only light was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, as he was powerless to make out what it meant, and be at, and sometimes apprehensive that he might be at the very moment an interesting case of spontaneous combustion, without having a consolation of knowing it. At last, however, he began to think, as you or I would have thought at first, for it was always the person not in the predicament who knows what ought to have been done in it, and would unquestionably have done it too. At last, I say, he began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from which on further tracing it, seemed to shine. The idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by name and bade him to enter. He obeyed. It was his own room. There was no doubt about it. Undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceilings were so hung with living green, and looked a perfect grove, from each part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly and mistletoe and ivy reflected back the light, as if so many little mirrors had scattered there. And such a mighty blaze went through the roaring of the chimney as the dull petrification of a hearth had never known in Scrooge's time or Marley's, or for many, many a winter season's gone. Heaped up on the floor to form a kind of throne were turkeys, geese, game, poultries, brawn, great joints of meat, suckling pigs, long wreaths of sausage, mince pies, plum pudding, barrels of oysters, red hot chestnuts, cherry cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, immense 12 cakes, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with the delicious steam. In easy state upon this couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch, which shaped not unlike Plenty's horn, and held it up, high up, to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping around the door. "Come in!" exclaimed the ghost. "Come in, and know me better, man." Scrooge entered timidly, and hung his head before the spirit. Was not the dogged Scrooge he had been. Though the spirit's eyes were clear and kind, he did not like to meet them. "I am the ghost of Christmas present," said the spirit. "Look upon me." Scrooge reverently did so. It was clothed in one simple green robe or mantle bordered with white fur. The garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, as disdained to be warded and concealed by any artifice. Its feet, observed beneath the ample folds of the garment, were also bare. On its hand, it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face and sparkling eyes, its open hands, its cheery voice, and unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful air, girdled around its middle with an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. "There, you have never seen the likes of me before," exclaimed the ghost. "Never," Scrooge made answer to it. "Have you never walked? For the younger members of my family, meaning, for I am very young, my eldest brother is born these latter years," resumed the phantom. "I don't think I have," said Scrooge. "I am afraid I have not. Have you many brothers, spirit?" "More than 1,800, said the ghost. "A tremendous family to provide for," muttered Scrooge. The ghost, a Christmas present, rose. "Spirit," said Scrooge submissively, "conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and learnt a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, let me profit by it." "Touch my robes." Scrooge did as he was told, and held it fast. Holly, mistletoe, red berries, ivy, turkey, geese, game, poultry, brawn, meat, pigs, sausage, oysters, pies, pudding, fruit, and punch all vanished instantly. So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of the night. They stood in the city streets on Christmas morning, where, for the weather was severe, the people made a rough but brisk and not unpleasant kind of music in the scraping the snow from the pavement in front of their dwellings and the top of their houses, whence it was mad delight to the boy to see it come plumping down into the road below and splitting to artificial little snowstorms. The house fronts looked black enough, and the windows blacker, contrasting with the smooth white sheet of snow upon the roofs, with the dirtier snow upon the ground, which that deposit had been plowed up in deep furrows by heavy wheels of carts and wagons, furrows that crossed and recrossed each other hundreds of times, where the great streets branched off and made intricate channels, hard to trace in the thick yellow mud and icy water. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with a dingy mist, half thawed, half frozen, whose heavier particles descended in a shower of sooty atoms. If all the chimneys in Great Britain had by one constant caught fire, were blazing away to their dear hearts. They were nothing very cheery in the climate, or there was nothing very cheery in the climate or the town, yet there was an air of cheeriness abroad that the clearest summer air and bright summer sun might have endeavored to diffuse in vain. For the people who were shoveling away on the housetops were jovial and full of glee, calling out to one another from the parapet, and now and then exchanging a vicious snowball, better-natured missiles far than many a wordy jest, laughing heartily if it went right, not less heartily if it went wrong. The poulterers' shops were still half open, and the fruiters were radiant in their glory. There were great round pot-belly baskets of chestnuts, shaped like the waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen, lolling at the door and tumbling onto the street in the apologetic odorpins. There were ruddy brown-faced broad-girthed Spanish onions, shining in the fatness of their growth like Spanish friars, winking from their shells in a wanton slyness at the girls as they went by, and glanced de misery at the hung of mistletoe. There were pears and apples clustered high in blooming pyramids. There were bunches of grapes made in the shopkeeper's benevolence to dangle from the conspicuous hooks that people's mouths might water. Her grates as they passed, there were piles of filberts, mossy and brown, recalling in their fragrance ancient walks amongst the woods and pleasant shuffling ankles deep through withered leaves. There were Norfolk binfins, squat and strow, when he's setting off the colors of oranges and lemons. And in the great compactness of their journey, or their juicy persons urgently entreating and beseeching to be carried home in paper bags and eaten after dinner. There were very gold and silver fish, set forth among these choice fruits in a bowl, through members of a dull, stagnant blooded race appeared to know that there was something going on, and to a fish went gasping round on their little whirl in slow, passionless excitement. The grocers, oh, the grocers, nearly closed, with perhaps 2 shutters down, or 1, though these cast such glimpses. It was not alone the scales descended on the counter made a very merry sound, the twine and roller parted company so briskly, and the canisters were rattled up and down like juggling tricks, or even that the blended scents of tea and coffee were so grateful to the nose, and even that the raisins were so plentiful and rare, the almonds so extremely white, sticks of cinnamon so long and straight, the other spices so delicious, and candied fruits so caked and spotted with molten sugar as to make the coldest lookers-on feel faint and subsequently joyous. Nor was it that the figs were moist and pulpy, or that the French plums blushed in a modest tartness from their highly decorated boxes, or that everyone was good to eat and in his Christmas dress, but the customers were all so hurried, so eager in the hopeful promise of the day, they tumbled up against each other at the door, crushing in their wicker baskets wildly, and left their purchases upon the counter, came forth running back to fetch them, and committed hundreds of the like mistakes in the best humor possible. While the grocer and his people were so frank and fresh, the polished hearts with which they fastened their aprons behind might have been their own, worn outside for general inspection, and for Christmas dows to peck as if they chose. And soon the steeples called good people all to church and chapel. Away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes, their gayest faces. At the same time there emerged scores of by-streets, lanes, and nameless turnings, immeasurable people carrying their dinners to the bakers' shops. The sight of the poor or revelers appeared to be an interest in the spirit's way very much, for he stood with Scrooge beside him in the baker's doorway, taking off the covers as the bearers passed, sprinkling incense on their dinner from his torch. It was a very uncommon kind of torch, for once or twice, when there were angry words between some dinner carriers, who were jostled each other and shed a few drops of water on them from it, and a good humor was restored directly. Or they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day, and so it was. God love it, so it was. In time the bells ceased, and the bakers were shut up. There were a genial shadowing forth of all the dinners, and progress of their cooking, and thawed lodge of wet above the baker's oven. The pavement spoke as if the stones were cooking too.
There's a particular flavor in what you sprinkle from your torch,
asked Scrooge.
There is, my own. Would you apply it to any kind of dinner on this day?
Asked Scrooge.
Really kindly given to a poor one most. Why to a poor one most?
Asked Scrooge.
'Cause it needs it most.
Spirit, said Scrooge after a moment's thought.
I wonder, you, of all the things and many words about you, should desire to cramp these people's opportunity of innocent enjoyment.
Aye, cried the spirit.
You would deprive them of their means of dining every 7th day, often the only day in which they can be said to dine at all, wouldn't you?
Aye, cried the spirit.
You seek to close these places on the 7th day,
said Scrooge.
And it comes to the same thing.
I seek, claimed the spirit.
Forgive me if I'm wrong, but it had been done in your name, or at least in that of your family.
There are those upon this earth of yours, returned the spirit, who lay claim to know us, who do their deeds, the passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness in our name, who are strange to us, and all our kith and kin, as they had never lived. Remember that, and the charge, which their doings of themselves, not us. Scrooge promised that he would, and they went on, invisible as they had been before, to the suburbs of the town. Actually, I do want to go over that bit that we just went over, because it's something that doesn't appear in many, if any, adaptations of this story. So during the times, whenever people would go to church on Sunday, that the bakers would leave their fires on so that the poor people could come in and cook dinner. Now, at the time, there was a push by some politicians that this shouldn't happen. Like, hey, let's not do this. It's Christmas. We shouldn't be doing this. And this is basically Dickens in pointing out, hey, that's really dumb and really cruel. This is the only time these people have to cook. Yeah, all of Charles Dickens' works are very clash conscious. He's a very big advocator for the poor. It was a remarkable quality of the ghost, which Scrooge observed as the baker's, that notwithstanding his gigantic size, he could accommodate himself to any place with ease. He stood beneath a low roof quite as gracefully and like a supernatural creature as possible as he could dine in a lofty hall. Perhaps it was the pleasure the good spirit had in showing off his powers of his, or else it was his own kind, generous, hearty nature, in sympathy with all poor men, and that led him straight to Scrooge's clerk, for there he went and took Scrooge with him, holding to his robe, and on the threshold of the door the spirit smiled and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling, sprinkling of his torch. Think of that. Bob had but 15. Bob a week himself had pocketed on Saturday but 15 copies of his Christian name, and yet the ghost of Christmas Pleasant blessed his 4-roomed home. And then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, Cratchit's wife, dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons, which was cheap, and made a goodly show for sixpence. She laid the cloth, assisted by Belladon Cratchit, second of his daughters, also brave in ribbons, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes, and getting the corners of his monstrous short collar, Bob's private property, conferred upon his son and heir in the honor of the day, into his mouth, rejoiced to find himself so gallantly attired, and yearned to show his linen to fashionable parks. And now two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the goose and known it for their own, baking luxurious thoughts of sage and onion. These young Cratchits danced around the table and exalted Master Peter Cratchit to the skies, while he, not proud though his collars nearly choked him, blew the fire until the slow potatoes bubbled up, knocking loudly on the saucepan lid to be let out and peeled.
What has ever got to your precious father, then? Said Mrs. Cratchit. And your brother, Tiny Tim? Martha wasn't as late last Christmas by half hour.
Here's Martha, mother, said a girl, appearing as she spoke.
Here's Martha, mother, cried the two young Cratchits. Hooray! There's such a goose, Martha! Why, blame your hearts alive, my dear, how late you are, said Mrs. Cratchit, kissing her a dozen times and taking off her shawl and bonnet for her with officious zeal.
We had a deal of work to finish up last night, replied the girl, and had to clear away this morning, mother.
Well, never mind so long as you've come, said Mrs. Cratchit. Sit ye down before a fire, my dear, and have a warm. Lord bless ye.
No, there's father coming, cried.
No, there's father coming, cried the two young Cratchits, who were everywhere at once. Hide, Martha, hide!
So Martha hid herself, and in came little Bob, the father, at least 3 feet a comforter exclusive of the fringe hanging down before him, and threadbare clothes darned up and brushed to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch, and his limbs supported by an iron frame.
Why, where's our Martha? Said Bob Cratchit, looking around. Not coming, said Mrs. Cratchit. Not coming, said Bob with a sudden declusion in his high spirits, for he had Tim's blood horse all the way from church and had come home rampant. Not coming upon Christmas Day? Martha didn't like to see him disappointed. It was only in a joke. She came out prematurely from behind the closet door and ran to his arms, while the two young Cratchits hustled Tiny Tim and bore him off to the wash-house, that he might hear the pudding and singing in the copper. And how did little Tim behave? Asked Mrs. Cratchit, when she had rallied Bob on his crotchety, and Bob had hugged his daughter to his heart's content. As good as gold, said Bob, and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful, sitting by himself so much, thinking the strangest thing you've ever heard. Told me, coming home, he hoped the people saw him in church, 'cause he was crippled, and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Bob's happy voice was tumultuous when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. His active little crutch, which was heard upon the floor, and back came Tiny Tim, for another word was spoken, escorted by his brothers and sisters to a stool before the fire, while Bob was turning up his cuffs, as if poor fellow were capable of being made more shabby, and compounded some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemon, and stirred it round and round, put it up on the hob to simmer. Master Peter and the two ubiquitous young Cratchits went to fetch the goose, with which they soon returned in high a procession. Such a bustling and ensured that you might have thought the goose the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon to which a black swan was a matter of course, and in truth it was something very like it in that house. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy ready beforehand in a little saucepan, hissing hot. Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor. Mrs. Belladonna sweetened up the applesauce. Martha dusted the hot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim behind him in a tiny corner of the table. The two young Cratchits set chairs for everyone, not forgetting themselves and mounting guard upon their post, crammed spoons into their mouths that they should shriek for the goose before their turn came to be helped. At last the dishes were set on, and the grace was said, succeeded by the breathless pause, as Mrs. Cratchit looked slowly all around, or all along the carving knife, preparing to plunge into the breast, which she did, when the knife long expected gash of stuffing issued forth. Some murmur of delight arose all around the board. Even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchits, beat on the table with the handle of his knife, feebly, and cried, "Hurrah!" There never was such a goose, Bob said. He didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. Its tenderness, flavor, size, and cheapness were themes of universal admiration. Eked out by applesauce and mashed potatoes was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. Indeed, as Mrs. Cratchit said with great delight, surveying one small atom of bone upon the dish, that they hadn't ate it all at last. Yet every one had had enough. The youngest Cratchit in particular were steeped in a sage and onion to the eyebrows. But now the plates were changed by Mrs. Bladena. Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witness, to take the pudding up and bring it in. Suppose it should not be done enough. Suppose it should break in turning out. Suppose somebody could have got over the wall of the backyard and stolen it while they were marrying the goose. A supposition at which the two young Cratchits became livid. All sorts of horror were supposed. Hello! A great deal of steam. The pudding was out of the copper. A smell like a washing day. That was the cloth. A smell like an eating house and a pastry cook. Looked next door to each other. The laundress next door to that. That was the pudding. In half a minute, Mrs. Cratchit entered, flushed but smiling proudly with the pudding, like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in half a quantrum of ignited brandy, and benighted with Christmas holly stuck into the top. Oh, a wonderful pudding! Bob Cratchit said, and calmly too, that he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Mrs. Cratchit said that now the weight was off her mind, she would confess she had had her doubts about the quality of flour, or quantity of flour. Everyone had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought that it was at all a small pudding for a large family. It would have been flat heresy to do so. Any Cratchit would have blushed to hint such a thing. At last the dinner was all done. The cloth cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. The compound of the jugs being tasted, and the considered perfect apples and oranges were put upon the table, a shovel full of chestnuts on the fire. Then all the Cratchit family drew around the hearth, and what Cratchit called a circle, meaning half of one, and at Bob Cratchit's elbow stood the family display of glass, 2 tumblers and a custard cup without a handle. These held the hot stuff from the jug, however, as well as golden goblets would have been, and Bob served it out with beaming looks, and while the chestnuts in the fire sputtered and crackled noisily, then Bob proposed, "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears! God bless us!" All the family re-echoed. "God bless us, everyone," said Tiny Tim, the last of all. He sat very closely to his father's side upon his stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he loved the child and wished to keep him by his side, dreaded that he might have taken from him. "Spirit," said Scrooge, in an interest he had never felt before, "tell me if Tiny Tim will live." "I see a vacant seat," replied the ghost, "in the poor chimney corner, and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved. If their shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die." "No, no," said Scrooge. "Oh, no, kind spirit, say you will be spared." "If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other than my race," returned the ghost, "will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, if he had better do it, and decrease the surplus of population." Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words, quoted by the spirit, was overcome with penance and grief. "Men," said the ghost, "if men you be in our heart, and not adamant forbear that wicked cat until you have discovered what the surplus is and where it is, we decide what men shall live, what men shall die. It may be, the sights of heaven, you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. God, hear the insects and the leaf pronouncing on the too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust." Scrooge bent before the ghost's rebuke, trembling cast his eyes upon the ground. But he raised them speedily, on hearing his own name.
"Mr. Scrooge," said Bob, "I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast." "The founder of the feast, indeed," cried Mrs. Cratchit. "I wish I had him here. I'll give him a piece of my mind to feast upon. Hope he have a good appetite for it." Man, Miss Piggy was great for this in the Muppet version. "My dear," said Bob, "the children, Christmas Day?" "It should be for Christmas Day, I'm sure," said she, "on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge, you know. He is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow." "My dear," was Bob's mild answer, "Christmas Day." "I'll drink his health for your sake and the day's," said Mrs. Cratchit. "And if not for his, long life to him. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We're very merry and very happy, I've no doubt." Man, she's got some fucking venom to her. I like her. Ironically, the Mrs. Piggy version is the most accurate version I've ever seen of this character. Like, she's always been a little spiteful. But, like, I think the Miss Piggy version fucking nailed her. That's hilarious. The children drank the toast after her, as the first of the proceedings with no heartiness, which had no heartiness. Tiny Tim drank it last of all, but did not care twopence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow of the party, was not dispelled for a full 5 minutes. After it had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before, and the mere relief of Scrooge the baleful being done with. Bob Cratchit told them how he had situation in his eyes for Master or Peter, which would bring in, if obtained, full 5 and 6 pence weekly. The 2 young Cratchits laughed tremendously at the idea of Peter being a man of business, and Peter himself looked thoughtfully at the fire from between his collars. He was deliberating what particular investments he should favor when he came to the receipt of that bewildering income. Martha, who was a poor apprentice at a milliner's, then told what kind of work she had to do, how many hours she worked at the stretch, how she went to lie in bed tomorrow morning for a good long rest, tomorrow being a holiday she passed at home. Also how she had seen a countess and a lord some days before, and how the lord was much about as tall as Peter, at which Peter pulled up his collar so high that you couldn't have seen his head, as if he had been there. All the time the chestnuts and jug went around and round. By and by they had song but a lost child traveling in the snow, when Tiny Tim, who had a plaintive little voice, sang, and very well indeed. Nothing but a high mark in this. They were not a handsome family. They were not well dressed. Their shoes were far from being waterproof. Their clothes were scantily, and Peter might have known, very likely did, the inside of a pawnbroker's. They were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, contented with the time, and when they faded, look happier yet in the bright sprinklings of the spirit's torch at a parting. Scrooge had his eyes upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. By this time it was getting dark, and snowing pretty heavily as Scrooge and Spirit went along the streets, and brightness of the roaring fires in the kitchen, parlors, and all sorts of rooms was wonderful.
Here the flickering of the blaze showed preparations for a cozy dinner, with hot plates baking through and through before the fire, and deep red curtains ready to be drawn shut out cold and darkness. There all the children of the houses were running out into the snow to meet their married sisters, brothers, cousins, uncles, aunts, and to be the first to greet them. Here again were shadows on the window blind of guests assembling, and a group of handsome girls, all hooded in fur boots, and all chattering at once, tripped lightly off to some near the neighbor's house, where woe upon the single man who saw them enter, artful witches, while they knew it in a glow. But if you had judged from the number of people on their way to friendly gatherings, you might have thought that no one was at a home to give them welcome when they got there. Instead of every house expecting company piling up its fire, it was half chimney high, blessing on it how the ghost exulted, how it bared its breadth abreast, and opened its capacious palm, floating on, outpouring with a generous hand its bright and harmless mirth on everything within reach. The very lamplighter who ran on before, dotting the dusky street with specks of light, who was dressed to spend the evening somewhere, laughed out loudly as the spirit passed, the little kind of lamplighter that he had company but Christmas. And now, without a word of warning from the ghost, they stood upon a bleak and deserted moor, where the monstrous masses of rude stone were cast about, and as though a burial place of giants, and water spread itself wherever upon its listed would have done so, over the frost that held its prisoner. And nothing grew but moss and furze and coarse rank grass. Down in the west the setting sun had left a streak of fiery red. We glanced upon the desolation for an instant, like a sullen eye, and frowning lower, lower, lower yet, was lost in the thick gloom of the darkest sky. "What place is this?" asked Scrooge. "A place where miners live, who labor in the bowels of the earth," returned the spirit. "But they knew me. See." A light shone from the window of a hut, and swiftly they advanced towards it. Passing through the wall of mud and stone, they found a cheerful company assembled around a glowing fire. An old man, old man and woman, with their children, their children's children, another generation beyond that, all decked out gaily for their holiday attire. The old man, in a voice and seldom rose above the howling of the wind upon the barren waste, was singing them a Christmas song, and a very old song from when he was a boy. From time to time they all joined in the chorus, so surely as they raised their voice, the old man got quite blithe and loud, and surely as they stopped, his vigor sank again. The spirit did not tarry here. Begged Scrooge hold his robe, passing on upon the moor, sped whither? No, to sea, to sea! To Scrooge's horror, looking back, he saw the last of the land, a frightful range of rocks behind them. His ears was deafened by the thundering of water that rolled and roared and raved among the dreadful caverns that it had worn, and fiercely tried to undermine the earth, built upon a dismal reef. Good night. Have a great Christmas. All right. Good night, Kakara. I hope you have pleasant dreams. And Merry Christmas. Where was it? A frightful range of rocks behind them, and his ears were deafened by the thundering of water as it rolled and roared and raged among the dreadful caverns it had worn, and fiercely tried to undermine the earth. Built upon a dismal reef of sunken rocks, some league or so from shore, on which the waters chafed and dashed the wild years through these, stood a solitary lighthouse. Great heaps of seawood clung to its base, and storm birds, born of the wind one might have supposed as seaweed of the water, rose and fell about it like the waves they skimmed. But even here, two men who watched the light had made a fire, and through the loophole in the thick stone wall shed out a ray of brightness on the awful sea. Joining their horny hands over the rough table at which they sat, they wished each other Merry Christmas in their own can of grog. One of them, the elder too, his face all damaged and scarred with hard weather as the figurehead of an old ship might be, struck up a sturdy song that was like a gale in itself. Again the ghost sped on, above the black and heaving sea, on, until being far away, as he told Scrooge from any shore they laid out a ship, they stood upon the helmsman of the wheel, and looked out into the bow. The officers who had the watch, dark ghostly figures in several stations, but every man among them hummed a Christmas tune, or had a Christmas thought, or spoke below his breath to his companion of some bygone Christmas day, with homeward hopes belonging to it, and every man on board, waking or sleeping, good or bad, had a kinder word for another on that day than on any day in the year, had shared to some extent in its festivities, and remembered those he cared for at a distance, and had known that it delighted it to remember him. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while listening to the moaning of the wind, and thinking what a solemn thing it was to move on through the lonely darkness over an unknown abyss, whose depths were secret as profound as death. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while thus engaged, to hear a hearty laugh. It was much greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew, and find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room, the Spirit standing, smiling by his side, and looking at the same nephew with approving affability. Laughed Scrooge's nephew. If you should happen, by any unlikely chance, to know a man more blessed in a laugh than Scrooge's nephew, all I can say is, I should like to know him too. Introduce him to me, and I'll cultivate his acquaintance. It is a fair, even-handed, noble adjustment of things, that while in this infection and disease and sorrow, there is nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humor. When Scrooge's nephew laughed in this way, holding his sides, rolling his head, twisting his face in most extravagant contortions, Scrooge's niece by marriage laughed as heartily as he, their assembled friends being naught but a bit behindhand, roared out lustfully. Ha 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 ha! He said that Christmas is humbug, as I live, cried Scrooge's nephew. He believed it too. More shame for him, Fred, Scrooge's niece, indignantly. Bless those women, they never do anything by halves, always in earnest. It is very pretty, exceedingly pretty, with a dimpled, surprised-looking capital, whole face, a ripe little mouth that seemed to be made to be kissed, as no doubt it was. All kinds of good little dots around her chin that melted onto one another when she laughed, and the sunniest pair of eyes you ever saw in a little creature's head. Although she was what you would have called provoking, but satisfactory too. Oh, perfectly satisfactory. What? What a weird way to say that she's attractive. But not too attractive. What a weird phrasing. He's a comical old fellow, said Scrooge's nephew. That's the truth. Not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offences carry his their own punishment. I have nothing to say against him. I'm sure he's very rich, Fred, hinted Scrooge's nephew. At least you always tell me so. What of that, my dear? Said Scrooge's nephew. His wealth is of no use to him, and do any good with it, doesn't make himself comfortable with it, and the satisfaction of thinking.
How is he ever going to benefit us with it? I've no patience for him. I've no patience with him, observed Scrooge's niece. Scrooge's niece's sisters and all the other ladies expressed the same opinion. Oh, I have, said Scrooge's nephew. No, I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself always. Here he takes it to his head to dislike us, and won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? Doesn't lose much of a dinner. Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner, interrupted Scrooge's niece. Everyone else said the same. Must have allowed to have been competent judges, because they had just had dinner. The dessert upon the table clustered around the fire by lamplight. Well, I'm glad to hear it, said Scrooge's nephew, because I had great faith in those young housekeepers. What do you say, Topper? Topper clearly got his eyes upon one of Scrooge's niece's sisters, where he answered that, as the bachelor was a wretched outcast, who had no right to express an opinion on the subject. Whereas Scrooge's niece's sister, the plump one, the lace tucker, not the one with the roses, blushed. Do go on, Fred, said Scrooge's niece, clasping her hands. He never finishes what he begins to say. Such a ridiculous fellow. Scrooge's nephew revelled in another laugh. It was impossible to keep this infection off. The plump sister tried hard to do it without aromatic vinegar. His example was unanimously followed. I was only going to say, said Scrooge's nephew, that the consequence of his taking a dislike to us and not making merry with us, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments, of which could do him no harm. I'm sure he loses pleasanter companions than he could find his own thoughts, either in his own mouldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him, if he finds me going there in good temper year after year and saying, Uncle Scrooge, how are you? He puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk £50. That's something. I think I shook him yesterday. It was their turn to laugh now at the notion of his shaking Scrooge, and being their thoroughly good-natured and not much caring what they laughed at, so they laughed at any rate, encouraged them in the merriment, and passed the bottle joyously. After tea they had music, for they were a musical family, and knew that they were about. They sung a glee or a catch. I can assure you, especially Topper, who could growl away in the bass like a good one, and never swell the large veins in his forehead or get red in the face over it. Scrooge's niece played well upon the harp, and played among the other tunes a simpler little air, a mere nothing you might learn to whistle in 2 minutes, which had been familiar to the child who fetched Scrooge from the boarding school, as he had been reminded of the ghost of Christmas past. The strain of music sounded. All the things the ghost had showed him came to mind, softened more and more. Thought if he could have listened to it often years ago, he might have cultivated the kindness of life for his own happiness, with his own hands without resorting to the sexton's spade, and buried Jacob Marley. But they did not devote the whole evening to music. After a while they played at forfeits, for it's good to be children sometimes, and never better than at Christmas, when its mighty founder was a child himself. Stop! There was the first game at Blind Man's Bluff, of course there was. And I no more believe Trooper was really blind than I believe he had eyes in his boots. My opinion is that it was a done thing between him and Scrooge's nephew. The ghost of Christmas present knew it. The way he went after that plump sister in the lace tucker was an outrage on the credulity of human nature, knocking down the fire irons, tumbling over the chairs, bumping against the piano, smothered himself amongst the curtains. Wherever she went, there he went. He always knew where the plump sister was. He wouldn't catch anyone else. If he had fallen up against him, as some of them did, on purpose, he would have made a feint of endeavoring to seize you, which would have been an affront to your understanding, would instantly have sailed off the direction of the plump sister.
often cried out that it wasn't fair, and it really was not. But when at last he caught her, when in spite of all of her silken rustling, her rapid fluttering past him, and gotten her into a corner which he has no escape, and her conduct was the most excruciable, for his pretending not to know her, his pretending that it was necessary to trust her headdress, and further to assure himself of her identity by pressing a certain ring upon her finger, her chain upon her neck was vile, monstrous. No doubt he told him her opinion of it. When altogether blind men being in office, they were so confidential together behind the curtains. Scrooge's niece was not one of the blind man of parties, but made of comfortable with a large chair and footstool in a snug corner, where the ghost and Scrooge were close behind her. She had joined the forfeits and loved her love to admiration with all the letters of the alphabet. Likewise, at the game of how, when, and where, she was very great. Secret Joy, Scrooge's nephew, beat her sister hollow, though they were sharp girls too, as Topper could have told you. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge, for wholly forgetting the interest he had in was going on, that his voice made no sound in their ears, and sometimes came out with guesses quite loud, and very often guessed quite right too, with the sharpest needle. Best Whitechapel warranted not to cut in the eye was not sharper than Scrooge, blunt as he took it in his head to be. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in the mood, and looked upon him with such favor that he begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guest departed. And this the spirit said could not be done.
"Here's a new game," said Scrooge. "1 half-hour, Spirit. Only one."
It was a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what. He only answered their questions yes or no. The case was a brisk fire of questioning to which he was exposed. It indicated from him that he was thinking of an animal, a live animal, rather disagreeable animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and talked sometimes, and lived in London, walked in the streets, and wasn't made a show of, wasn't led by anyone, didn't live in a meagre inn, and was never killed in a market. It was not a horse, or an ass, or a cow, or a bull, or a tiger, or a dog, or a pig, or a cat, or a bear. At every fresh question that was put to him, nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter, and was so inexplicably tickled that he was obliged to get up off the sofa and stamp. At last the plump sister, falling to a similar state, cried out, "I found it! I know what it is, Fred! I know what it is!" "What is it?" cried Fred. "It's your Uncle Scrooge!" What it certainly was, admiration was the universal sentiment, though it was objected the reply is it a bear ought to have been yes, and as much an answer in the negative was sufficient to have diverted that thought from Mr. Scrooge, if only they had ever had any tendency that way. "It was given us plenty of merriment, I'm sure," said Fred. "Be ungrateful not to drink to his health. Here's a glass of mulled wine, ready to our hand at the moment, and I say, Uncle Scrooge." "Well, Uncle Scrooge," they cried. "A Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, wherever he is," said Scrooge's nephew. "He wouldn't take it from me. May he have it none the less, Uncle Scrooge." Uncle Scrooge was precociously came so gay and light in the heart that he would have pledged the unconscious company in return, and thanked them with an inaudible speech the ghost had given him time. The whole scene passed off in the breath of the last word spoken by his nephew. He and the spirit were again upon their travels. Much they saw and far they went. Many homes they visited, but always to the happy end. The spirits stood beside sick beds and were cheerful. On foreign lands they were close at home by struggling men. They were patient, their greater hope, by poverty and it was rich. In all homes, his hospitals and jails, in misery's every refuge, were vain men, and a little brief authority had not made fast the door and barred the spirit out. He left his blessing and thought, Scrooge, his his percepts and taught Scrooge his percepts? I don't know what that means. It was a long night, fully a night. But Scrooge had his doubts of this, because the Christmas holidays appeared to be condensed to the time and space they passed together. It was strange, too, that while Scrooge remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew old, clearly older. Scrooge observed the change, and never spoke of it until they left a children's 12th night party, looking at the spirit as they stood together in an open place, noticed that its hair was gray. "Are spirits' lives so short?" asked Scrooge. "My life upon this globe is very brief," replies the ghost. "It ends tonight." "Tonight!" cried Scrooge. "Tonight at midnight. Hark! The time is drawing near." The chimes were ringing the 11:15 at the moment. "Forgive me if I'm not justified in what I ask," said Scrooge, looking intently at the spirit's robe. "But I see something strange, and not belonging to your cell, protruding from your skirt. Is it a foot or claw?" "It might be a claw, with flesh there upon it," was the spirit's sorrowful reply. "Look here." The folding of the robes it brought two children, wretched, abject, frightened, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at his feet and clung upon the outside of the garment. "Oh, man, look here. Look, down here," exclaimed the ghost. They were a boy and girl, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate, too, in their humility. With graceful use they stood as filled their features out, and touched them with the faintest tint, or the freshest tints. A stale, shriveled hand like that of age had pinched and twisted them, and pulled them into shreds. Where angels might have sat enthralled, devils lurked and glared out menacingly. No change, no degradation, no perversion of humility in any grade, though all the mysteries of wonderful creation had monsters half so horrible and dread. Scrooge stepped back, appalled, having them shown to him in this way. He tried to say they were fine children, but the words choked himself, rather than be parties to lies of enormous magnitude. "Spirit, are they yours?" Scrooge could say no more. "They are man's," said the spirit, looking down upon them. "They cling to me, appealing from their fathers. The boy is ignorance, the girl is want. Beware them both, in all the degrees. Most of all, beware this boy. For on his brow I see written which is doom, unless the writing be erased. Deny it," cried the spirit, stretching upon his hand towards the city. "Slander those who tell it to you. Admit it for the fictitious purpose, and make it worse, and abide the ending." "Had they no refuge or resource?" cried Scrooge. "Are there no prisons?" asked the spirit, turning on him for the last time with his own words. "And are there no workhouses?" The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked at him for the ghost and saw it was not, and the last stroke ceased to vibrate. He remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, lifted up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. Yo, hi Andy, welcome to the stream. You just missed one of the sickest burns. Stab 4, the last of the spirits. Oh, best fish, not fish. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee. For in the air, though which this spirit moved, it seemed scattered gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of its visible save one outstretched hand. But for this, it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night and separate from the darkness by which it was surrounded. He felt that it was tall and stately when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved.
Know who it is, but it's Mr. Four, the Reaper in the lore of my world. I mean, it's usually depicted as the Reaper in adaptations.
I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to be, said Scrooge. The spirit answered not, but pointed onward with its hands. You are about to show me shadows of things that have not happened, but will happen in time before us, Scrooge pursued. Is that so, spirit? The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. The only answer he received. Although well used to ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it. The spirit paused for a moment, as observing his condition and giving him time to recover. But Scrooge was all the worse for it. It thrilled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusky shroud there were ghostly eyes intently fixed upon him, while he stretched his own to the utmost, could see nothing but a spectral hand in one great heap of black. Ghost of the future! He exclaimed. I fear you more than any spectre I've seen. But as I know your purpose to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I saw, I'm prepared to bear your company, and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed before them. Lead on, said Scrooge. Lead on. The night is waning fast, and precious time to me, I know. Lead on, spirit. The phantom moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city. The city seemed to spring up about them and encompass them of its own act. But there they were, in the heart of it. On, chains amongst the merchants who hurried up and down, chinked the money in their pockets, conversely in groups, and looked at the watches and trifled thoughtfully with the great gold seals and so forth, as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. No, said a great fat man with a monstrous chin. I don't think much about it either way. I only know he's dead. When did he die? Inquired another. Last night, I believe. Why, what was she meeting with him? Asked a third, taking a vast quantity of snuff out of a very large snuff box. I thought he'd never die. God knows, said the first with a yawn. What has he done with his money? Asked a red-faced gentleman with a pendulous excrescence at the end of his nose that shook like gills of a turkey cock. I haven't had, said the man with the large chin, yawning again. Left it to his company, perhaps. Hasn't left it to me, that's all I know. The pleasantry was received with a general laugh. It'll likely be a very cheap funeral, said the same speaker, for upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer? I don't mind going if lunch is provided, observed the gentleman, the excrusion on his nose. But I must be fed if I had to make one. Another laugh. But I'm the most disinterested among you, after all,
said the first speaker, for I never wear black gloves and I never eat lunch, but I'll offer to go if anyone else will. When I come to think of it, not at all sure it wasn't his most particular friend, for he used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye.
Speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with groups. Scrooge knew the men and looked towards the spirit for an explanation. The phantom glided on to a street. Its finger pointed to two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking the explanation might lie here. He knew these men were also perfectly. They were men of business, very wealthy, great importance, and made a point always of standing well in their esteem, in a business point of view that is strictly in a business point of view.
How are you? Said one. How are you? Returned the other. Well, said the first, old Scratch has got his own at last, eh? So I'm told, returned the second. Cold, isn't it? Seasonable for Christmas time. You got a skater, I suppose? No, something else, I think. Oh, good morning. Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their parting. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised the spirit would attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial. A feeling assured they must have some hidden purpose he set himself to consider would unlikely be. It should scarcely be supposed to any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was past. This ghost's presence or province was the future. Nor could he think of any one immediately connected to him to whom he could apply them, but nothing doubting that to whomsoever they applied, that had some latent moral to him, his own improvement. He resolved to treasure up every word he could, and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared, for he had an expectation the conduct of his future self would give him the clue he missed, and would render the solution of these riddles easy. He looked about in that very place for his own image. Another man stood in his accustomed corner. Though the clock pointed to its usual time for the day being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured in through the porch. Gave them little surprise, however, for he had been revolving in his mind a change of life, and hoped he saw his new-born resolutions carried out in this. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom, outstretched hand. When he roused himself in his thoughtful quest, he fancied from the turn of the hand situations in reference to himself the unseen eyes are looking at him unkeenly, made him shudder and feel very cold. They left the busy scene and went to an obscure part of town where Scrooge had never penetrated before, though he recognized its situation, its bad rupture. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunkard, slipshod, and ugly. Alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their offensive smell and dirt and life upon the staggering streets. The whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery. Far in its den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed victualling shop below a penthouse roof, with iron old rag bottles, bones, and greasy offals were bought. Upon the stores within were piled up heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, files, scales, weights, and refuse irons of all kind. The secrets that few would like to scrutinize were bred and hid in the mountains of unseemly rags, masters of corrupted fat and sculptures of bones, sitting in among the wares he dealt in by a charcoal stove made of old brick, was a gray-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without by a frosy curtaining of miscellaneous tatters, hung upon a line and smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. She had scarcely entered when another woman, simply laden, came in too. He was closely followed by a man in faded black, who was no less startled by the sight of them than he would have been upon the recognition of each other.
After a short period of blank astonishment in which the old man with the pipe joined them, they all three burst into laugh.
Let the charwoman alone be the first, said she who had entered first. Let the laundress alone be the second, and the undertaker man alone to the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance if you hadn't had all three met here without meaning it. You couldn't have met in a better place, said old Joe, removing his pipe from his mouth. Come on to the parlor. You were made free of it all long ago, you know. And the other two aren't strangers. Stop till I shut the door of the shop. How shrieks. I had such a rusty bit of metal in the place of its own hinges. I believe and I'm sure there's no such old bones in here as mine. We're all suitable to be our calling. We're all matched. Come to the parlor. Come to the parlor.
The parlor was in the space behind the screen of rags. The old man raked the fire together on an old stir rod. And having trimmed his smoky lamp, for it was night, with the stem of his pipe, and put it in his mouth again. While he did this, the woman who had already spoken, threw her bundle onto the floor, and sat down in the flaunting manner on a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees, looking a bold defiance at the other two.
What odds then? What odds then, Mrs. Delbert? Said the woman. Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did. That's true indeed, said the laundress. No man more so. Why then, don't stand staring as if you're more afraid, woman. Who's the wiser? You're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose? No, indeed, said Mrs. Doubler and the man together. We should hope not. Very well then, cried the woman. That's enough. Who's worse for the loss of a few things like this? Not a dead man, I suppose. No, indeed, said Mrs. Doubler, laughing. If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, wicked old screw, pursued the woman, why wasn't his natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have been somebody to look after him when he was stuck with death, instead of lying gasping out his last there, alone by himself. Whose words never spoke, said Mrs. Doubler. It's a judgment on him. I wish you a little heavier judgment, replied the woman. Should have been. You may depend upon it. If I could have laid my hands on anything. Over that bundle, old Joe, let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid for them to see it. We know pretty well there was helping ourselves. What we met here, I believe it's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe.
With the gallantry of her friends would not allow this, and the man in faded black mounting the breech first produced his plunder. It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, a brooch of no great value were all. They were severely examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give for each upon the wall, and added them up to a total when he found there was nothing more to come.
That's your account, said Joe. I wouldn't give another 6 pence. I would be boiled for not doing it. Who's next?
Mrs. Dibbler was next. Sheets and towels and a little wearing a pail, 2 old-fashioned silver teapots and a pair of silver sugar tongs and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner.
Always give too much to ladies. Weakness of mine. That's the way I ruin myself, said old Joe. Joe account, if you'd asked me for another penny, made it an open question, or reported for being too liberal, knock off half a crown. Now unto my bundle, Joe, said the first woman.
Joe went down to his knees, the greater convenience of opening it. Having unfastened the many knots, dragged a large, heavy roll of some dark stuff.
What you call this? Bed curtains? Said Joe.
Ah, returned the woman, laughing, leaning forward and crossed her arm.
Bed curtains? You mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with him lying there? Yes, I did, replied the woman. Why not? You were born to make your fortune, said Joe, and he'll certainly do it. I certainly shan't hold my hand when I get everything in it by reaching it out for the sake of such a man as he was. Suppose you, Joe, returned the woman coolly. Don't drop the oil upon the blankets now. His blankets, said Joe. Who else you think? Replied the woman. He isn't likely to take cold without 'em, I dare say. Hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh? Said old Joe, stopping in his work and looking up. Don't be afraid of that, said the woman. I ain't so fond of his company that I loiter about for such things. If he did, you may look around that shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it for a threadbare place. Best you had, and a fine one too. It'd have wasted if it hadn't been for me. What do you call wasting of it? Putting it on him to be buried in, for sure, replied the woman with a laugh. Somebody was fool enough to do it. Took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such purpose, ain't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body. Can't look uglier than he did in that one. Moose listened to the dialogue in horror. They sat grouped upon their spoil, the scantly light afforded by the old man's lamp. He viewed them with detestation and disgust, which could hardly have been greater, that they had been seen demons marketing the corpse itself. That's the same woman when old Joe, producing a flannel bag with money in it, took out their several gains upon the ground. The end of it, you see, frightened everyone away from him. One was alive, no profit to us when he's dead. Or to profit us when he was dead. Spirit, said Scrooge, shuddering from head to foot. I see. What caused this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heavens, what is this? He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed. Now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which beneath a ragged sheet there lay something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself its awful language. The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with such accuracy, though Scrooge glanced round it in obedience to secret impulse, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light rising in the outer air, light stretched upon the bed. On it plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, the body of this man. Scrooge glanced towards the phantom. His steady hands pointed to the head. Cover was so carelessly adjusted, the slightest raising of it, the motion of fear upon Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it. No more power to withdraw the veil than dismiss the spectre at his side. O cold, cold, rigid, dreadful death, set upon thine altar here, and dressed with such terrors as thou hast as thy command, for this is thy dominion, with a love revered and honored, and thou canst not turn one hair to thine dread purpose, and make one feature odious. It is not that the hand is heavy, and fall down when released, not that the heart and pulse are still, but that the hand was open, generous and true, the heart brave, warm and tender, the pulse a man. Strike, shadows, strike, and see his good deeds spring from the wound to sow the world with life immortal. Thanks for the hydrate and stretch, Ina. This sounds thirsty. I mean, reading aloud this much can dry my throat pretty well. No voice pronounced these words in Scrooge's ears, and yet he heard them when he looked upon the bed. He thought, if this man could raise up now,
What were his foremost thoughts? Avarice, hard dealing, gripping cares. They brought him to a rich end, truly. He lay in the dark, empty house. Not a man, a woman, or child to say that he was kind to me. In this or that, with the memory of one kind word I will have kind to him. A cat was tearing at the door, sounds of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone. What they wanted in the room was death. Why they were so restless and disturbed, Scrooge did not dare to think.
Spirit, he said, this is a fearful place. I'm leaving it. I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me. Let us go.
Still the ghost pointed with an unmoving finger to the head.
I understand.
And you, Scrooge returned.
And I would do it if I could. But I've not the power, Spirit. I've not the power.
Again it seemed to look upon him.
If there were any person in this town who feels the motion caused by this man's death,
said Scrooge, quite anguished,
show that person to me, Spirit, I beseech you.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment, like a wing of its drawing it, revealing a room by daylight where a mother and child were. She was expecting someone with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked out from the window, glanced at the clock, tried in vain to work with her needle, but could hardly bear the voice of the children at their play. At the length, the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young. There was a remarkable expression in it now. A kind of serious delight, in which she felt ashamed, and which he struggled to repress. He sat down to dinner, and had been hounding for him by the fire, when she asked him faintly what news, which was not until, after a long silence, appeared embarrassed in how he answered. "Is it good," she said, "or bad?" To help him.
"Bad," he answered.
"We are quite ruined?"
"No, there's hope yet, Caroline."
"If he relents," she said, amazed. "There is. Nothing's past hope if such a miracle's return. And
he's past relenting," said her husband. "He's dead."
She was a mild and patient creature. Her face spoke true. Thankful in her soul to hear it, and she said so. With clasped hands she prayed forgiveness in the moment and was sorry, first with the emotion of her heart.
What the half-drunk woman whom I told you of last night said to me when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then.
To whom shall debts be transferred?
I don't know.
Excuse fish, not fish.
But before that time we shall be ready with the money. Even though we were not, it would be a bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor and the successor. You may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline.
Yes, softened as they would, their hearts were lighter. And the children's face, hushed and clustered round to hear that they were so little understood, were brighter. It was happier house for this man's death. The only emotion that the ghost could show him, caused by the event, was one of pleasure.
"Let me see some tenderness connected with the death," said Scrooge, "or that dark chamber, Spirit, which we just left just now, will be forever present to me."
And the ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet. They went along. Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, a dwelling he had visited before, found another, the children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet, noisy little Cratchits were still statues in one corner, sat looking up at Peter, with a book before him. The mother and daughters were engaged in sewing. Surely they were very quiet.
Hold on.
Okay. And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. When Scrooge heard these words, he had not dreamed them. The boy must have read them out. As he and the spirit crossed the threshold, why did he not go on? Mother laid her work upon the table, put her hands to her face. The colour hurts my eyes, she said. The colour? Ah, poor tiny Tim. You better not. You better now. Hogan, said Cratchit's wife. Makes him weak by candlelight. I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home for the world. Must be near his time. Past it, rather, Peter answered, shutting up his book. But I think he'd walk a little slower than he used. Those few little last evenings, Mother. They were very quiet again. At last she said, in a steady, cheerful voice, the only faltered once, I would have known him walk with. I had known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed. And so have I, cried Peter. Often. And so have I, exclaimed another. So had all. But he was very light to carry, she resumed, intent upon her work. His father loved him so. It was so that it was no trouble, no trouble. And there's your father at the door. Hurried out to meet him, little Bob and his comforter, and had need of it, poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob. And they all tried who should help him the most. The two young Cratchits got upon his knees and laid his child a little cheek against his face as they did. No, mind, father, don't be grieved. Bob was very cheerful with them, spoke pleasantly to all the family. Are things going swimmingly? Well, I'm not a fish, but things are indeed going swimmingly. My voice, I feel, is fading. That sucks. He looked at the work upon the table, praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls. To be done long before Sunday, he said. Sunday? You went today, then, Robert? Said his wife. Yes, my dear, returned Bob. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. You'll see it often. I promised him I'd walk there on Sunday. My little child, cried Bob. My little child. Broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it, he and his child would have been further apart, perhaps, than they were. He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, lively, cheerfully, and hung with Christmas. There's a chair set close behind the child, signs of someone having been there lately. Poor Bob sat down in it. When he thought a little and composed himself, kissed the little face, he was recoiled, or he was concealed to what had happened, and went down again quite happily, reconciled to what had happened. They drew about the fire and talked, the girls and mothers working still. Bob told them the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, who had been scarcely seen but once, meeting him in the street that day. Seen him looked just a little down, you know, said Bob, inquiring what had happened to distress him, on which, said Bob, for he is the pleasantest spoken gentleman you have ever heard. I told him I am heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, he said, and heartily sorry for your good wife. By the by, now, how he ever knew that, I don't know. Knew what, my dear? Why, that you were a good wife, replied Bob. Everyone knows that, said Peter. Very well observed, my boy, cried Bob. I hope they do. Heartily sorry, he said, for your good wife, if I can be of service to you in any way. He said, giving me his card. It's where I live. Pray come to me. Now, if it wasn't, cried Bob, for the sake of anything he might be able to do for us, so much as for his kind ways that it might quite delightful. Really seemed as if he'd known our Tawny Tim and felt with us. I'm sure he's a good soul, said Mrs. Cratchit. You can be sure of it, my dear, returned Bob. If you saw him, spoke to him, I shouldn't at all be surprised, mark what I say. He's got Peter in a better situation. Only hear that, Peter, said Mrs. Cratchit. And then, cried one of the girls, Peter will be keeping company with someone and setting up for himself. Getting along with you, retorted Peter, grinning. It's just as likely as not, said Bob. One of these days, though, plenty of time for that, my dear. But however and whenever we part from one another, so we shall none of us forget poor Tawny Tim, shall we? As the first parting there was among us. Never, father! They all cried. Cried they all. And I know, said Bob, I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient, how mild he was, though he was little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves, forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it. No, never, father, they all cried. I'm very happy, said little Bob. I am very happy. Mrs. Cratchit kissed him, his daughters kissed him, the two young Cratchits kissed him, and Peter and him shook hands. Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childless essence was from God. Spectre, said Scrooge, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it. I don't know how. Tell me, what man that was whom we saw lying? The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed to him as before, though at a different time. He thought, indeed, there seemed to be no order in these latter visions, save that they were in the future, and the resorts of business men, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, as to end just now desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment. This court, said Scrooge, though which we hurry now, is where my place of occupation is, has been for the length of time. I see the house. Let us behold what I shall be in days to come. The spirit stopped. A hand pointed elsewhere. The house is yonder, Scrooge exclaimed. Why do you point away? The exploitable finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. The office still, but not his. Furniture was not the same. The figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. He joined it once again, wondering why and whither he had gone, accompanied it until they reached an iron gate, paused looking round before entering. A churchyard here then. The wretched man, whose name he had now to learn, lay underneath the ground. A worthy place, walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, the growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up with too much burying, fat with repellent appetite. A worthy place. A spirit stood amongst the graves, and pointed down to one, advanced towards it trembling. This phantom was exactly as it had been, but he dreaded that he saw a new meaning in its solemn shape. For I draw nearer to that stone which you point, said Scrooge. Answer one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be, or the things that may be only? Still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood. Men's courses will shadow certain ends, to which, if preserved, they must lead, said Scrooge. But if the courses can be departed from, the ends will change. Say this thus with what you show me. The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went. Follow the finger reading upon the stone the neglected grave of his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Am I that man who lay upon the bed? He cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. No, spirit! No, no, no! The finger still was there. Spirit! He cried, tightly clutching his robe. Hear me! I am not the man I was! I will not be the man I must have been! For this intercourse, why show this to me if I am past all hope? For the first time, the hand appeared to shake. Good spirit! He pursued, as down upon the ground he fell before. Your nature indicates for me, and pity me. He assures me that I've yet may change these shadows you've shown me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. I will honor Christmas in my heart, and try to keep it in all the year. I shall live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell that I may sponge away the writing on this stone. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and determined it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him, holding up his hand in the last prayer to have his face revered, saw an alteration of the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost.
I'll put a lovely Dorito the Moon Castle's trolling me on X. Ew, calling it X? Ew. Why are you calling it X? Let's take a quick look. How are you guys on about over here? And I'm back. Welcome back. Why'd you call it X? Are you a cop? Because Twitter took longer to type? Anyways, don't you guys usually argue on there? Going, I'm not cute, you're cute. Stab 5. The end of it. Yes, the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, time before him was his own, to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, oh, Jacob, on my knees. Must be spreading excess cheer. They not doing that? Figured it'd be a good time for the Fae. He was so fluttered, hurting, and so glowing with good intention that his broken voice was scarcely answer to his call. Yet sobbing violently, he in his conflicts with the spirit, the face wet with tears. "They're not torn down," cried Scrooge, folding one of his bed curtains in his arm. "They're not torn down, rings it all. They're here. I am here. And the shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will. I know they will." His hands were busy with the garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance. "I don't know what to do," cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath, and making a perfect lacoon of himself with a stocking. "I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel, merry as a schoolboy. I am as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Hello here. Whoop, hello." He had frisked into the sitting room, now standing there, perfectly winded. "There's the saucepan, the gruel within," cried Scrooge, starting off again and going around the fireplace. "There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner which the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's the window I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened." Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, and a most illustrious laugh. As in trolling me, trolling me, spreading Christmas cheer. I don't know. I just never look. I don't know how she's trolling you. Okay. Pretty lies and slander as per usual. Is it your usual cuteness tsundere off? He checked in his transports by the churches ringing out of the luscious peals he had heard. Clash, clang, hammer, ding dong, bell, bell, dong, ding, hammer, clang, clash. Oh, glorious, glorious! Running to the window, he opened it, and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring, cold, cold piping, and for the blood to dance to, golden sunlight. Heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. Noodle Dorito and now Jack Dennis and bunnies. I know what I fucking said. "What's today?" cried Scrooge, calling down to a boy in Sunday's clothes, who perhaps had loitered. Hold on, someone's at the door. Right, I'm back. I know what you said. I was freaking wrong saying it that way. Nope. No, it wasn't. What's today? Cried Scrooge, calling down to the boy in Sunday clothes, who perhaps had loitered in to look about him. "Eh?" returned the boy, with all his might of wonder. "What's today, my fine fellow?" said Scrooge. "Today?" replied the boy. "Why, Christmas Day." "It's Christmas Day," said Scrooge to himself. "I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Course they can. Course they can. Hello, my fine fellow." "Hello," returned the boy. "Do you know the Pult or the next street? He put one at the corner." "I should hope," Scrooge inquired. "I should hope I did," replied the lad. "An intelligent boy," said Scrooge. "Remarkable boy. Do you know whether they sold the prize turkey that's hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one." "What, the one as big as me?" returned the boy. "What a delightful boy," said Scrooge. "It's a pleasure to talk with. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck." "It's hanging there now," replied the boy. "It is," said Scrooge. "Go and buy it." "Walker!" exclaimed the boy. "No, no," said Scrooge. "I'm in earnest. Go and buy it. Tell them to bring it here, and I may give them the directions where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5, and I'll give you half a crown." The boy was off like a shot. He may have had a steady hand of the trigger. Who could have got a shot off half so fast? "I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's," whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with laughter. "He shouldn't know who sent it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob will be." This sounds like a reverse Grinch, like reverse evil. The way I'm making this voice being is kind of goofy. So used to story Scrooge McDuck is a Scottish accent. I really like the Muppet version. But yeah, the Disney Mickey one was really good too. For the deaf one, they had Pete be deaf. And he only gets like one line and he hams the hell out of it. "Why, it's you, Scrooge, the richest man in the cemetery." The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did, somehow, and went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there, waiting for his arrival, the knocker caught his eye. "I shall love it as long as I live," said Scrooge, patting it with his hand. "I scarcely ever looked at it before. An honest expression it has on its face. Wonderful knocker. Here's the turkey. Hello! Oh, whoop! How are you? Merry Christmas!" It was a turkey. He could have stood upon his he never could have stood upon his legs, that bird, for he had snapped them short off in a minute like sticks of sealing wax. "Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. You must have a cab." The chuckle with which he had said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle in which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle in which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded with the chuckle in which he sat down breathless in his chair again, and chuckled till he cried. Shaving was not an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving required attention, even when you don't dance while you're at it. But if he had cut the end of his nose off, he would put a piece of sticking plaster over it and been quite satisfied. He danced himself all in his best, and last got into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth, and seeing them in the ghost of Christmas present, walking with hands behind him. Scrooge regarded every one with delighted smile,
and looked so irresistibly pleasant in a word that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Good morning, sir. Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge set it off. Then afterwards, that of all the blithe sounded he had ever heard, the vilest of his ears. He had not gone far when coming on towards he had beheld the portly gentleman who he had walked into counting-house the other day, said, "Scrooge and Marley, I believe." Sent a pang across his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him when they met. Knew a path lay straight before him, and he took it. "My dear sir," said Scrooge, quickening his pace and taking the old gentleman by his hands, "how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. Very kind of you. Merry Christmas to you. Mr. Scrooge?" "Yes," said Scrooge, "that is my name. I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. And will you have the goodness?" Here Scrooge whispered in his ear. "Lord bless me!" cried the gentleman, as if his breath was taken away. "My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?" "If you please," said Scrooge. "Not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in well, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?" "Yes, sir," said the other, shaking hands with him. "I don't know what to say. As such more but don't say anything, please," retorted Scrooge. "Come and see me. Will you come and see me?" "I will," cried the old gentleman. It was clear he meant to do so. "Thank ye," said Scrooge. "I ain't quite obligated to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you." He went to church, and walked about the streets, and watched the people hurry to and fro, patted the children on the head, and questioned beggars, looked down into the kitchens of houses and upon the windows, found that everything could yield him pleasure. Never dreamed that any walk, that anything could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon he turned his steps towards his nephew's houses. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it. "Is your master at home, my dear?" said Scrooge to the girl. Nice girl, very. "Yes, sir." "Where is he, my love?" said Scrooge. "He's in the dining room, sir, along with mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please." "Thank ye. He knows me," said Scrooge, with his hands already in the dining room lock. "I'll go in there. I'll go in here, my dear." He turned in it gently, and swaddled his face in round the door, and looking at the table, which was spread out in great array. These young housekeepers are always nervous on such points, and like to see that everything is right. "Fred!" said Scrooge. Dear hearts alive, how his niece, by marriage started. Scrooge had forgotten for the moment upon her sitting in the corner with the footstool, or he wouldn't have done it on any account. "Why, bless my soul! Who's that?" "It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?" Let him in, and it is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came. So did every one when they came. Wondrous full party, wonderful games, wonderful anonymity, wonderful happiness. But it was early in the office the next morning. Oh, he was early there. He could only be the first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did. He did. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9, no Bob. 1/4 no Bob. Full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with the door wide open, that he might see him come into the tank. There's a lot of people were coming in that part. Into the house. We promise you this isn't an orgy. His hat was off before he entered the door. His comforter, too. He was on a stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen, as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. "Hello," growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice, as near as he could feign it. "What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?" "I'm very sorry, sir,"
said Bob. I am behind my time. You are, repeated Scrooge. Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please. It's only once a year, sir, pleaded Bob, appearing from the tank. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir. Now, I tell you what, my friend, said Scrooge. I am not going to stand in this sort of thing any longer, and therefore, continued leading from his stool, giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again. Therefore, I am about to raise your salary. Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the ruler. And the momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him and calling to the people of the court for help in straight waistcoats. Guys, Scrooge has gone mad! He's gonna raise my salary! Well, don't look a gift horse in the mouth, stupid! A Merry Christmas, Bob, said Scrooge with an earnest that could not be mistaken as he clasped him on the back. A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, that I have given you. For many years I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family. And we'll discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop. Bob, make up the fires, buy another skull cuddle, before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit. Scrooge was better than his word, and did it all, and infinitely more. The Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He come as good as friend, as good a master, as good as man, as good old city knew, and any other good old city, town, or brawl in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them. For he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on the globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset, and knowing that such as these would be blind anyways, thought it quite as well that she should wrinkle up their eyes and grins, as he having the malade in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. It was always said of him, he knew how to keep Christmas well. If any man alive possessed knowledge, the knowledge may they be truly said of us, and of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless every one. All right. That was all of it. It was almost 4 hours. God, my throat's killing me. So I'm going to wrap up there. Let's see. Should I rate anyone today? Do. How about Yuli? Aw, thanks for the hearts. Anyways, to everyone still here, I'd like to wish you all a fond farewell, and thank you for stopping by. If you like this, of course, follow me on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing because it really helps me out. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll actually be hanging out with Ghastly. So, y'all can look forward to that. We're gonna go ahead and raid Julie. So I want you all to be on your best behavior. Furry adventures? I'd say probably not, but we haven't decided what we're doing. I mean, it's not gonna be pirates. If it's anything, the only thing I know right now, possibly, is Don't Starve Together, but we haven't decided. Not concretely, at least. Anyways,
With all that being said, though, I shall see you all later. All right. Bye-bye.